The auction room fell silent as Sebastian Ravenhart raised his paddle one final time, his eyes locked on the woman across the floor whose world he was about to destroy. Lillian Ashcroft's face drained of color as the auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. 300 acres, her last chance at survival, slipping through her fingers because the wealthiest man in England had decided to crush her. She'd been right all along. Men like him didn't love, they conquered. And now, in front of London's elite, he'd proven exactly what he was, a monster in gentleman's clothing. What she didn't know, what would shatter everything she believed, was that the deed already bore her name. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how two people could destroy each other while desperately trying to connect, we need to go back to where it started. Back to the moment Sebastian Ravenhart realized he'd been sleepwalking through his entire life. Stay with me until the end. This story goes places you won't expect. And when it does, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The problem with being Sebastian Ravenhart, 6th Duke of Thornfield, wasn't the money or the title, or the 3 estates scattered across England like chess pieces on a board he'd inherited too young. The problem was simpler and somehow worse. Nothing meant anything anymore. He stood at the edge of the Duchess of Weatherby's ballroom, champagne in hand, watching the same scene play out for the 100th time. Lady Catherine Monroe approached from the left. He could feel her trajectory before he saw her, the way you sense weather changing. She wore pale blue, calculated to complement his dark evening coat, her smile practiced to convey both innocence and availability. "Your Grace," she said, dropping into a curtsy so perfect it had obviously been rehearsed. "What a magnificent evening." "Lady Catherine." Sebastian inclined his head with the minimum effort required by politeness. "I was just saying to Mother how the gardens at Thornfield must be spectacular this time of year. The roses, particularly." She paused, waiting for an invitation that wouldn't come. "I've always been passionate about horticulture." 2 weeks ago, she'd claimed passionate interest in Greek philosophy. Before that, thoroughbred breeding. Sebastian had stopped tracking the rotating hobbies designed to match his supposed interests. Interests he wasn't sure he actually had anymore. "How fortunate for the roses," he said. Lady Catherine's smile flickered, confusion crossing her face before training reasserted itself. She laughed as though he'd said something clever rather than vaguely insulting. "You're terribly witty, Your Grace." "I'm really not." "Sebastian!" Lord Marcus Pemberton materialized at his elbow, rescuing Lady Catherine from further humiliation. "Stop terrorizing the ladies and come settle a debate. Hartwick insists the Ascot favorite is that bay from Newmarket, but I say—" Sebastian let Marcus guide him away, Lady Catherine's wounded expression fading into the general blur of faces. They all looked the same after a while. Pretty, polished, interchangeable. "You're in rare form tonight," Marcus muttered. "Even for you. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." "Liar. You've got that look, like you're calculating the nearest exit." Sebastian took a long drink. "There are 4, including the servants' entrance behind the palm trees." "Christ." Marcus shook his head. "You need to snap out of whatever this is. You're 32, obscenely wealthy, and half the women in London would happily bear your children. Some men would consider that paradise. Some men have terrible taste. What do you want then? Really?" It was a good question. Sebastian had been asking himself the same thing for months, watching his life unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a play they'd seen too many times. He had everything anyone could want. He felt nothing. "I want to feel something real," he said finally. "Just once. Something that isn't choreographed or calculated or designed to extract a proposal." Marcus laughed. "Good luck with that. You're a duke. Nothing about your life is real." He was right, of course. Sebastian had known it for years. But knowing it and accepting it were different things, and lately the gap between them had started to ache. The evening dragged on. He danced with the appropriate partners, made conversation about horses and politics and the weather, and counted down the hours until he could leave without causing offense. By midnight, he'd nearly succeeded. Then he overheard the conversation that changed everything. He'd stepped onto the terrace for air, escaping the crush of bodies and perfume and desperation. 2 men stood in the shadows near the balustrade, voices low but carrying in the quiet night. Completely unsuitable, of course. No fortune, no connections. Fathers dead, estates mortgaged to the rafters. Then why bother pursuing her? I'm not pursuing her, you idiot. I'm pursuing the land. 600 acres bordering my property, and the girl's too stupid to realize what it's worth. I'll court her, marry her, and consolidate the holdings. Then she can retire to the country and produce heirs while I— Bit cold even for you, Hartwick. It's practical. She's plain as toast anyway, not like I'm giving up anything. Sebastian's hand tightened on his glass. He knew Viscount Hartwick by reputation, a mediocre man with expensive tastes and flexible morals. The woman they were discussing was likely some unfortunate creature Hartwick had selected for asset stripping disguised as romance. "What's her name?" the second man asked. "Ashcroft, Lillian Ashcroft, late baronet's daughter. She'll be grateful for the attention." Sebastian filed the name away without knowing why. Maybe because it represented something he recognized, another person trapped in a transaction pretending to be life. Or maybe because the casual cruelty in Hartwick's voice stirred something he'd thought long dead. Anger. He left the ball shortly after, Marcus's parting words following him into the night. "Try not to look so much like you're attending your own execution at the Pemberton dinner Thursday. It's off-putting." The Pemberton dinner. Right. Another evening of performance and emptiness. Sebastian climbed into his carriage and closed his eyes, wondering how many more of these he could endure before he started doing something destructive just to feel alive. He didn't know it yet, but the answer was 3 days. Bombs. Lillian Ashcroft stood in her father's study, her study now, though she still couldn't think of it that way, and tried to make the numbers work. They didn't. They hadn't worked in 6 months, and no amount of recalculation would change the fundamental problem. Ashcroft Hall was dying by degrees, and she was watching it happen with the helpless precision of someone tracking a terminal illness. "Miss Lillian?" Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, concern creasing her weathered face. The housekeeper had been with the family for 30 years. She'd watched Lillian grow from a serious child into a serious woman, and she recognized the signs of despair even when Lillian tried to hide them. "The roof in the east wing is leaking again," Mrs. Brennan said quietly. "And Cook wants to know about the grocery account." Lillian closed the ledger. "Put buckets under the leak. Tell Cook to order what we need. I'll sort the account next week." "With what money, dear?" The question hung in the air, blunt and unavoidable. Lillian met the older woman's eyes and saw sympathy there, and understanding, and something worse, pity. "I'm working on it," Lillian said. "I know you are. But you can't do everything yourself. Have you considered— No. You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to suggest marriage, someone suitable, someone with money." Lillian stood, turning to the window overlooking grounds that had once been magnificent and were now merely maintained. "The answer is no. Your father wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself for this place. My father sacrificed everything for this place, his health, his happiness, his life in the end. I'm not letting it die because I'm too weak to carry what he left me." Mrs. Brennan sighed. "Strength isn't the issue, child. Money is, and unless you've discovered a gold mine in the South Pasture, the Hartwell property." Lillian turned from the window, something sharp and desperate in her eyes. "It's going to auction next month. 300 acres bordering our eastern boundary. If I can secure it, I can lease it to Thompson's sheep operation. The income would stabilize us for years." "Can you afford it?" "I can if I mortgage everything else. It's a risk, but it's madness. If something goes wrong, then I lose. But I'm losing anyway, just slower. At least this gives me a chance." Mrs. Brennan opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. She'd known Lillian long enough to recognize when stubbornness had calcified into determination. "Your mother would have wanted you to be happy, you know, not just dutiful. I'll be happy when Ashcroft Hall is secure." "Will you?" Lillian didn't answer. Happiness seemed like a luxury from another life, something other people got to want. She had responsibilities instead, and ledgers that wouldn't balance, and a roof that leaked in 3 different places. After Mrs. Brennan left, Lillian returned to the accounts, working by lamplight as the sun set over land her family had held for 6 generations. She would not be the one to lose it. Whatever it took, whatever she had to sacrifice or risk or endure, she would not fail. The knock at the door came at 8 o'clock, unexpected and unwelcome. "A visitor, Miss Lillian," Mrs. Brennan announced, her tone carefully neutral. "Viscount Hartwick." Lillian's stomach tightened. She knew Hartwick peripherally. Their fathers had been acquainted, and she'd seen him at various county functions. He'd never paid her particular attention before, which meant this visit had a purpose. "Show him in." Hartwick entered with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no. He was handsome in a conventional way. Fair hair, regular features, expensive tailoring. Everything about him suggested careful curation. "Miss Ashcroft, forgive the intrusion." He offered a practiced smile. "I was passing through and thought I'd pay my respects. It's been too long since we last spoke." They'd never really spoken. Lillian gestured to a chair, already exhausted by whatever this was. "Your estate looks well," Hartwick continued, settling in as though he belonged there. "Managing it yourself, I hear. Quite unusual. Necessity rather than choice. Still admirable. A woman of your capabilities." He paused as though the compliment required digestion. "I've actually been thinking about your situation quite a lot lately." "Have you?" "The burdens you've inherited, the responsibilities. It can't be easy managing alone." Lillian waited. Men like Hartwick didn't make social calls. They made moves. "I wanted to propose something," he continued. "A partnership of sorts. Your land borders mine in several places. There could be efficiencies in combining our operations. Shared resources. Consolidated management." "You want to buy my land?" "I want to help you." The correction was smooth, almost believable. "And yes, perhaps over time, some form of formal arrangement might make sense. But first, I thought we might become better acquainted. I'm hosting a dinner party next week. Small gathering. I'd be honored if you'd attend." Every instinct Lillian possessed screamed warning. She'd heard enough gossip to know Hartwick's reputation, debts, schemes, a willingness to bend rules when convenient. Whatever he wanted, it wasn't partnership. "I'm afraid my schedule doesn't permit. The Pembertons will be there. And the Duke of Thornfield." Lillian paused despite herself. The Pembertons were influential. An introduction could be useful. And the Duke, Sebastian Ravenhart, was a name everyone knew. Wealthy beyond measure, connected to every important family in England. The kind of man whose attention could change fortunes. Not that his attention would ever land on someone like her. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Hartwick smiled like he'd won something. "Excellent. I'll send details. And Miss Ashcroft? I really do want to help. I think we could be very good for each other." After he left, Lillian sat in the gathering dark, uneasy prickling along her spine. She didn't trust Hartwick's sudden interest, but she also couldn't afford to refuse potential allies, not when Ashcroft Hall teetered on a knife's edge. The Pemberton dinner arrived faster than she wanted. Lillian dressed in her best gown, 3 years old, carefully maintained, nothing like the fashionable silks the other women would wear. She looked plain. She knew it. But there was a difference between plain and invisible, and she'd spent enough years managing an estate to know how to hold her ground in a room full of people who thought themselves superior. The Pemberton mansion blazed with light and money. Lillian entered feeling like an imposter, knowing her presence here was Hartwick's doing and probably served purposes she hadn't identified yet. "Miss Ashcroft!" Hartwick appeared immediately, offering his arm with proprietary confidence. "Let me introduce you to everyone. You'll love the Duchess. Absolutely charming woman. And the Duke, of course. Everyone's curious about him tonight. He's been rather elusive lately." Lillian let herself be led through the crowd, barely listening to Hartwick's running commentary. She was too busy cataloging exits and counting the minutes until she could leave without causing offense. Then Hartwick stopped and someone turned, and Lillian found herself face to face with Sebastian Ravenhart. He was taller than she'd expected. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. He wore his wealth like a second skin, understated, perfect, completely unconscious, the kind of man who'd never questioned his place in the world because it had been handed to him at birth. Lillian disliked him immediately. "Your Grace," Hartwick said with excessive enthusiasm, "may I present Miss Lillian Ashcroft, Miss Ashcroft, the Duke of Thornfield." Sebastian inclined his head, polite and distant. "Miss Ashcroft." "Your Grace." Lillian curtsied because protocol demanded it, already planning her escape. "Miss Ashcroft manages her late father's estate," Hartwick continued, as though this were a charming eccentricity rather than grinding necessity. Quite the accomplished young woman. Sebastian's gaze sharpened slightly. Does she? I do my best, Lillian said flatly, refusing to perform gratitude for attention she hadn't asked for. The Ashcroft land is quite extensive, Hartwick went on, apparently determined to sell her like livestock. Excellent soil. Prime location. Miss Ashcroft has done remarkable work maintaining it. How fortunate for the soil, Sebastian said. The echo of his earlier comment to Lady Catherine hung in the air. Lillian caught it, caught the faint amusement in his eyes, and felt something spark. Recognition, maybe, or challenge. The soil requires rather more than fortune, she said coolly. It requires work, which, I realize, may be an unfamiliar concept in some circles. Hartwick laughed nervously. Miss Ashcroft has a delightful wit. Does she? Sebastian's attention fully focused now, something shifting in his expression. Not offense, interest. I'm sure His Grace understands the difference between work and inherited advantage, Lillian continued, unable to stop herself. One builds character, the other builds entitlement. The nearby conversations faltered. Hartwick made a small, strangled sound. Sebastian smiled for the first time, and it was nothing like the polite mask he'd worn earlier. I'm beginning to think I've been insulted. How refreshing. If you're unsure, I can clarify. Please do. I'm suggesting that managing an estate through actual effort creates different perspectives than simply owning one through accident of birth. Though I'm sure you're very good at... She paused. Whatever it is dukes do with their time. Sebastian, Marcus Pemberton appeared suddenly, clearly attempting damage control. And Miss Ashcroft, I see you've met. Wonderful. Can I steal His Grace for a moment? There's someone he absolutely must... I'm quite content here, Sebastian said, not looking away from Lillian. Miss Ashcroft was about to tell me what she thinks dukes do with their time. I'm fascinated. Attend parties, Lillian said. Collect rents they didn't earn. Marry for connections, the usual. You forgot hunting and drinking. I assumed those fell under the general category of wasting time. A fair assessment. Sebastian's smile widened. Though you're missing the most important ducal activity, which is being profoundly, unrelentingly bored. The honesty surprised her. For just a second, the mask slipped and she saw something underneath, something tired and real and unexpectedly raw. Then it was gone, replaced by amused detachment. How terrible for you, Lillian said, but her tone had lost some of its edge. Isn't it? While you're doing actual work that builds actual character, I'm trapped in a gilded cage wondering if anything I do matters. Though I suppose from your perspective, that's just what I deserve. I didn't say that. You implied it quite effectively. Hartwick attempted to redirect the conversation toward safer topics. The weather, the season, anything that wouldn't result in social disaster. But Sebastian ignored him, his attention fixed on Lillian with an intensity that made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't name. Tell me about your estate, he said. The actual work, not the polite version. Why? Because I'd like to hear about something real, and you seem constitutionally incapable of lying. I'm capable of many things, Your Grace. Lying simply isn't worth the effort. See? That's exactly what I mean. Everyone else here would have said, oh, I always tell the truth, while calculating how to turn the conversation to their advantage. You just admitted to pragmatic honesty. It's almost exotic. How jaded you must be to find honesty exotic. You have no idea. Lillian studied him, trying to reconcile the bored aristocrat with the man asking questions like he actually cared about the answers. It didn't fit together. Men like him didn't care about estate management or honest conversation. They cared about entertainment and advantage and what they could extract from every interaction. The work is endless, she said finally, testing whether his interest was real. Tenants need maintenance. Crops need management. Accounts need balancing. Equipment needs repair. It's solving 100 small problems every day while trying to prevent the big problems from destroying everything. Sounds exhausting. It is. Why do it? Because it's mine. Because my father built it and died for it. Because the people who depend on it deserve someone who won't abandon them for something easier. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. That's the first time I've heard someone talk about responsibility like it means something. What else would it mean? An obligation, a burden, something to be minimized or delegated or escaped. Then you know the wrong people. I know everyone. That's the problem. Dinner was announced, and Hartwick maneuvered Lillian away before the conversation could continue. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt strangely disappointed, like she'd been interrupted mid-discovery. Throughout dinner, she caught Sebastian watching her from across the table, not with the calculated interest of men like Hartwick, but with something more complicated, curiosity mixed with challenge, mixed with what might have been recognition. She refused to look back. Men like him were dangerous precisely because they made you forget what they were: rich, powerful, playing games with rules only they understood. After dinner, the women retreated to the drawing room for the obligatory hour of mindless gossip, while the men remained behind for port and politics. Lillian endured it with gritted teeth, counting minutes until she could leave. "The Duke seemed quite taken with you," Lady Pemberton observed with poorly concealed curiosity. "I don't think I've ever seen him sustain a conversation that long." "We were discussing estate management," Lillian said. "Hardly fascinating." "Everything is fascinating when Sebastian Ravenhart is involved. Half the women in London are trying to catch his attention." "Then they're welcome to it," Lady Pemberton laughed. "You say that like you mean it." "I do." "How unusual. Most women would be thrilled." "I'm not most women." When the men rejoined them, Sebastian made his way directly to Lillian, ignoring several pointed attempts to intercept him. "Miss Ashcroft, would you care to continue our earlier conversation?" "I can't imagine we have anything more to discuss, Your Grace." "Then you have a limited imagination. Or you have an inflated sense of your own interest." He smiled. "There it is again. That complete unwillingness to perform." "Should I be performing? Everyone else is." "Perhaps that's why you're so bored." "Perhaps." He paused. "Would you walk with me?" "The gardens are pleasant, and significantly quieter than this room." Every instinct told her to refuse. Nothing good came from private conversations with men like Sebastian Ravenhart, but something in his expression, a strange mix of challenge and hope, made her hesitate. 10 minutes, she said. "I need to leave soon." "Afraid I'll corrupt you?" "Afraid you'll waste my time." They stepped onto the terrace, the cool night air a relief after the stifling drawing room. Sebastian led her down the stone steps into gardens lit by paper lanterns, far enough from the house for privacy, but not so far as to cause scandal. "You intrigue me, Miss Ashcroft," he said finally. "I'm really quite ordinary." "You're the opposite of ordinary. You're the first person in years who hasn't tried to impress me." "Should I have?" "God, no. It's wonderful. I finally meet someone who treats me like an actual human being instead of a walking title, and it's the woman who clearly thinks I'm useless." "I don't think you're useless. You think I'm entitled and lazy and probably decorative. I think you've had every advantage in life and are somehow still miserable, which is either tragic or pathetic, depending on whether you're doing anything about it." Sebastian stopped walking. "That's possibly the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me." "You asked for real conversation." "So I did." He turned to face her fully. "Here's some honesty in return. You're right. I am bored and useless and wasting every advantage I've been given. I wake up every morning in houses I didn't earn, surrounded by people who want things from me I don't want to give. And I can't remember the last time I felt anything that wasn't some variation of empty." The rawness in his voice surprised her. Lillian had expected deflection or charm, not this unvarnished confession. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you won't use it against me. Everyone else would store it away, weaponize it later. You'll probably just tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself." "You should stop feeling sorry for yourself." He laughed, and it sounded real. "There it is. You have resources most people would kill for. If you're miserable, change something." "Change what?" "Everything. Anything. Stop attending parties you hate. Stop courting women you don't want. Find something that actually matters and do it." "Like managing a failing estate against impossible odds? If that's what matters to you." "What matters to me," Sebastian said slowly, "is finding something that feels real. Something that hasn't been bought or performed or arranged for advantage." "Good luck with that." "You think I won't find it?" "I think you're looking in the wrong places." "Where should I be looking?" Lillian met his eyes, something stirring in her chest she didn't want to name. "I don't know, but it's not here. Not in these gardens with these people playing these games." "What if I found it in you?" The words hung between them, too direct to be flirtation, too honest to be strategy. You didn't, Lillian said firmly. You found someone who doesn't care about your title. That's novelty, not reality. And novelty wears off. You're probably right. I usually am. But I'd still like to see you again. Why? Because talking to you is the first time in months I've forgotten to calculate exit routes. Because you're sharp and real, and you don't want anything from me except to be left alone. Which, perversely, makes me want to know you better. That's absurd. Completely. Will you allow it anyway? Lillian wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was dangerous, that men like Sebastian didn't pursue women like her without ulterior motives, that Hartwick was probably involved somehow, that nothing good could come from letting a duke into her life when she was barely holding it together. But there was something in his eyes, something hungry and desperate and achingly sincere, that made her hesitate. I don't have time for games, she said finally. Neither do I. Not anymore. If this is some sort of scheme, it's not. I promise you, the only thing I'm scheming to do is have another conversation with the one person in England who might actually tell me the truth. Against her better judgment, against every warning instinct, Lillian heard herself say, one conversation, on my terms, at Ashcroft Hall, where you can see exactly what you're getting involved with. When? Thursday, 2 o'clock. Don't be late. I won't be. She left shortly after, ignoring Hartwick's attempts to arrange further meetings. In the carriage home, Lillian tried to understand what had just happened. She'd gone to the dinner expecting tedium and extraction attempts. She'd left with the Duke's promise to visit her crumbling estate. It was absurd, dangerous, probably stupid. She'd allowed it anyway. And somewhere in her chest, beneath the layers of responsibility and fear and carefully constructed defense, something that felt almost like anticipation had started to bloom. She crushed it immediately. Nothing good came from hoping. She'd learned that lesson years ago. Sebastian arrived at Ashcroft Hall at exactly 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon, which surprised Lillian more than it should have. Men of his station were fashionably late, as a matter of course. Punctuality suggested he actually cared. She watched from the study window as his carriage rolled up the drive, noting the understated elegance of it. Expensive, but not ostentatious, the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. He stepped out looking less like a duke and more like someone dressed for actual activity. Simple coat, practical boots, no unnecessary ornamentation. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, eyebrows raised. The Duke of Thornfield has arrived, Miss Lillian. Shall I show him to the drawing room? No. Bring him here. If he wants to see reality, he can start with the account books. You're going to frighten him off. Good. But when Sebastian entered the study, he didn't look frightened. He looked interested, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the worn furniture, the maps covering the walls, the ledgers stacked on every surface. This, he said, is exactly what I hoped for. Chaos and debt? Evidence of actual work. May I? He gestured to the chair across from her desk. Lillian nodded, watching as he settled in with the careful attention of someone genuinely trying to understand his surroundings. Thank you for allowing this, Sebastian said. I know you didn't have to. I'm still not sure why I did. Because you're curious, same as me. Curious about what? Whether this is real. Whether I meant what I said about wanting something beyond performance. Lillian pushed a ledger across the desk. Want reality? There it is. 6 months of accounts. Every shilling earned and spent, every repair delayed, every decision that might save us or sink us. That's my reality. Sebastian opened the ledger, actually reading it. Most men would have glanced and moved on, but he studied the entries, his expression sharpening as he began to understand what the numbers represented. You're hemorrhaging money on the North Fields, he said finally. I know. The drainage is failing. It's costing you crops and repair fees. I know that too. Why not fix it? With what money? Every shilling goes to keeping us operational. Long-term repairs are a luxury I can't afford. Sebastian flipped through more pages. But if you fix the drainage, the increased yield would pay for the repair in 3 seasons. If I survive 3 seasons, if the repair works, if a dozen other things don't break in the meantime. Lillian leaned back. Ideal uncertainties, Your Grace. Guaranteed small losses are safer than possible large gains. That's defensive thinking. That's survival thinking. He looked up, meeting her eyes. You're right. I'm sorry. I forgot for a moment what it's like to have actual stakes. The apology surprised her. Men like him didn't apologize, especially not to women they barely knew. Walk with me, Lillian said, standing abruptly. If you want to understand reality, you need to see it. She led him through the house, pointing out leak damage and needed repairs, through grounds that showed both pride and neglect, past outbuildings that needed work and fields that needed investment. She didn't soften it or make excuses. This was Ashcroft Hall, beautiful and broken, beloved and barely holding on. Sebastian absorbed it all in silence, asking occasional questions that showed he was actually listening. When they reached the old oak on the eastern boundary, Lillian finally stopped. My father brought me here the day he realized he was dying, she said quietly. Told me this land was worth more than money. Worth fighting for, worth sacrifice. She touched the rough bark. I promised him I'd keep it alive. Some days I'm not sure I can. Why tell me this? Because you wanted real conversation. This is as real as it gets. I'm 26 years old, unmarried, managing a dying estate with no prospects and no options. Men like Hartwick see me as an acquisition opportunity. Men like you see me as a curiosity, and I'm too tired to pretend either of those things doesn't make me want to scream. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't see you as a curiosity. Then what do you see? Someone fighting a battle no one else thinks you can win. Someone who promised to do something impossible and refused to break that promise, even though it's destroying you. He paused. I see someone I'd like to help if you'd allow it. I don't need charity. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering... He stopped, seeming to search for words. Friendship? Maybe. Partnership? A chance to do something that actually matters instead of attending another empty party. You don't know me. No. But I'd like to. There it was again, that dangerous sincerity that made Lillian want to believe him. She'd spent years building walls against hope because hope was a luxury that led to disappointment. But something in Sebastian's expression made those walls feel thinner than she'd thought. I have a dinner to attend tomorrow night, he continued. Another performance. Come with me. Why? Because I want you there. Because watching these people through your eyes might make it tolerable. Because I'm asking. I don't belong in those circles. Neither do I. Not really. We'll be outsiders together. Lillian knew she should refuse. This was how it started. Small requests, reasonable explanations, the slow erosion of boundaries until you'd given more than you meant to and gotten nothing in return. But she heard herself say, one dinner. If it's unbearable, I'm leaving. Fair enough. He left shortly after, and Lillian stood beneath the oak, trying to understand what she'd just agreed to. Mrs. Brennan found her there an hour later, still thinking. You're playing with fire, child. I know. Do you? Men like him don't befriend women like us. They collect and discard. He's different. They all are. Until they're not. Lillian wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because Mrs. Brennan was right. She was playing with fire. And the smart thing, the safe thing, would be to stop now before she got burned. But she'd spent years being smart and safe, and it hadn't saved her yet. Maybe it was time to try something different, even if different meant dangerous. Even if dangerous meant the Duke of Thornfield looking at her like she was something rare and real and worth fighting for. Even if that look was almost certainly a lie. The dinner was at the Ashford estate, and Lillian regretted accepting the invitation before her carriage even left Ashcroft Hall. She'd spent 2 hours trying to make her outdated gown look presentable, pinning and adjusting until Mrs. Brennan finally put a hand on her shoulder and said, You look fine, dear. Stop torturing yourself. But fine wasn't the same as belonging, and Lillian knew the difference would be obvious the moment she walked through those doors. Sebastian met her outside, appearing from the shadows like he'd been waiting. He took in her appearance with a single glance, not judging, just noting, and offered his arm. You came, he said. I said I would. People say many things. Following through is rarer. Inside, the Ashford mansion blazed with the kind of careless wealth that made Lillian's carefully managed budget feel like poverty. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble, flowers that must have cost more than her quarterly tenant rents. Women in gowns that probably represented a year of her income drifted past, their laughter high and practiced. Lillian felt every eye land on her, cataloging and dismissing in the same breath. "Ignore them," Sebastian murmured. "Half of them are drowning in debt, and the other half are desperately boring. You're worth 10 of anyone here." "You don't know that." "I'm an excellent judge of character. It's my only actual skill." Lady Caroline Ashford descended on them immediately, her smile sharp as cut glass. "Your Grace, how wonderful. And Miss Ashcroft, was it? How charming. We weren't expecting you." Translation: "You weren't invited, you don't belong." "Last-minute arrangement," Sebastian said smoothly. "I hope that's not an inconvenience." "Of course not. Any friend of yours is always welcome." Lady Caroline's eyes said the opposite. "Though I'm afraid the seating arrangements are already fixed. Miss Ashcroft, you'll be at the far end, near Lord Weatherby. I'm sure you'll find him stimulating." Lillian had met Lord Weatherby. He was 70, deaf in one ear, and spent most conversations discussing his digestive issues. The placement was deliberate, a punishment for crashing their carefully curated social hierarchy. "Actually," Sebastian said, his tone pleasant but immovable, "Miss Ashcroft will be seated beside me. I'm sure you can adjust something." Lady Caroline's smile froze. "You didn't contradict a duke, even when he was being unreasonable." "Of course, I'll have the staff rearrange immediately." As she swept away, Lillian turned to Sebastian. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. She was being cruel." "I can handle cruelty." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to." The dinner was exactly as unbearable as Lillian had anticipated. The conversation centered on gossip, fashion, and strategic marriage prospects, the social equivalent of watching paint dry, except paint had more substance. She pushed food around her plate and tried to look engaged, while internally counting the minutes until escape became socially acceptable. Beside her, Sebastian looked equally trapped, though he hid it better. He made appropriate responses, laughed at weak jokes, and played his part with the tired precision of someone who'd performed this role 1,000 times. "Tell me, Miss Ashcroft," Lady Caroline called from across the table, her voice cutting through the chatter. "I hear you manage your father's estate yourself. How progressive." The word dripped with condescension. Several conversations stopped. "Someone has to," Lillian said evenly. "But surely a man would be more suited to such responsibilities. The complexities of land management, tenant relations, financial decisions, it must be overwhelming for someone of your background." "My background includes growing up on that land, learning from my father, and spending the last year keeping 600 acres operational despite limited resources." "What's your background in estate management, Lady Caroline?" The table went silent. "You didn't challenge your hostess, not if you wanted future invitations." Lady Caroline's smile turned venomous. "I was fortunate enough to marry a man capable of handling such matters. Perhaps you might consider doing the same, rather than stubbornly clinging to responsibilities beyond your capacity." "Perhaps if I'd been fortunate enough to be born wealthy, I could afford to be useless," Lillian said. "But some of us have to actually work." Someone gasped. Sebastian made a noise that might have been a strangled laugh. "I'm sure Miss Ashcroft didn't mean," Lord Ashford began, attempting damage control. "I meant exactly what I said." Lillian set down her fork, years of accumulated resentment finally finding voice. "You all sit here discussing fashion and gossip like they're accomplishments, spending money you didn't earn, looking down on anyone who actually contributes something beyond decorative presence. And you have the audacity to suggest I'm the one overreaching?" "Miss Ashcroft," Lady Caroline said icily, "I think perhaps you're overtired. The stresses you've mentioned." "I'm not overtired, I'm disgusted. This whole performance, the clothes, the manners, the careful conversations designed to establish hierarchy without saying anything real. It's exhausting and empty and completely pointless." "Then why are you here?" someone asked. "Good question." Lillian looked at Sebastian, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Why was she here? To prove something, to herself or him or these people who'd already decided she didn't matter? "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "Excuse me." She stood, ignoring protocol, and walked out. Behind her, the table erupted in scandalized whispers. She'd just committed social suicide, burning bridges she might have needed, confirming every assumption they'd made about her unsuitability. She didn't care. The night air hit her face like absolution. Lillian stood on the terrace, gripping the stone balustrade, trying to remember why she'd thought this was a good idea. That, Sebastian's voice came from behind her, was magnificent. She turned. He'd followed her out, and he was smiling. Not the polite society smile, but something genuine and delighted. "I just destroyed any chance of social acceptance," Lillian said. "You told a room full of shallow hypocrites exactly what they needed to hear. I've wanted to do that for 10 years. Then why haven't you?" "And because I'm a coward. Too comfortable in my cage to risk breaking out." He moved closer. "But you're not. You walked in there knowing they'd judge you, and when they did, you didn't shrink. You fought back." "I humiliated myself. You were honest. There's a difference." Lillian laughed bitterly. "Honesty doesn't pay bills or save estates. I needed connections, opportunities, and I just set all of them on fire because I couldn't control my temper. Or maybe you needed to stop pretending you could ever belong in that world. Maybe you needed to realize you're better than all of it. Easy to say when you're a duke." "Is it?" Sebastian's expression hardened. "You think being born into this makes it easier? I'm trapped by it. Expected to marry some appropriate woman, produce appropriate heirs, maintain appropriate appearances, and never ever admit that it's all meaningless performance. At least you have the freedom to walk away." "I don't have freedom. I have responsibility. Which you chose, which you fight for, which matters." He stepped closer. "Do you know what I do?" "Nothing. I collect rents from people who work. I attend parties where nothing happens. I exist as a decorative piece in a system I didn't create and can't escape. You're fighting for something real. I'm just here." The rawness in his voice startled her. This wasn't the polished duke or the bored aristocrat. This was someone as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. "Then do something about it," Lillian said. "You have resources I'd kill for. Use them." "How?" "I don't know, but standing here complaining about your golden prison while doing nothing to escape it is just another form of cowardice." He flinched. "You don't pull punches, do you? I told you I didn't have time for games." "No, you don't." Sebastian was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. "What if I helped you?" "We've had this conversation. Not like this, not just friendship or curiosity. What if I actually invested in Ashcroft Hall, partnered with you to fix the drainage, upgrade the equipment, stabilize the estate?" Lillian's heart jumped, then immediately crashed back to earth. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's real. Because it matters. Because working with you to save something that actually exists might be the first meaningful thing I've done in years. You don't know anything about estate management. Then teach me. You said I should do something. This is something. It's insane." "Probably. Is that a no?" Lillian wanted to say yes. The offer was everything she needed: capital, resources, a way forward that didn't involve slow death by 1,000 cuts. But every instinct screamed warning. Men didn't invest in failing estates out of altruism. They invested for control, for ownership, for leverage. "What would you want in return?" she asked carefully. "A chance to be useful, to learn, to work beside someone who actually cares about the outcome." "That's not an answer." Sebastian met her eyes. "I want to matter to something that matters. I want to wake up knowing the day ahead has purpose. I want—" He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I want to spend time with you without pretending it's anything other than wanting to spend time with you." The honesty hit harder than any practiced seduction could have. Lillian had been prepared for manipulation. She wasn't prepared for this raw confession. "I don't trust this," she said. "I know. I don't trust you." "I know that too." "Then why offer?" "Because trust can be built. Because I'm willing to prove myself. Because walking away from this, from you, feels like giving up the first real thing I've found in my entire useless life." Lillian turned back to the balustrade, her mind racing. Accept, and she risked everything: her independence, her control, her carefully guarded heart. Refuse, and she went back to drowning slowly, watching Ashcroft Hall die by degrees. "I need to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." "And Sebastian?" She looked at him. "If this is a game, if you're doing this out of boredom or novelty or some kind of aristocratic charity project, Walk away now, because I can't afford to lose more than I've already lost. It's not a game. I promise you that. She wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. She wanted to believe someone actually saw her, valued her, wanted to help without expecting her soul in return. But wanting wasn't the same as trusting, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. The next week passed in a blur of second-guessing. Sebastian sent a letter outlining his proposal, specific numbers, timelines, investment structures. It was professional, detailed, and completely legitimate. No hidden clauses, no obvious traps, which somehow made it more suspicious. "He's serious," Mrs. Brennan said, reading over Lillian's shoulder. "This could save us, or destroy us in new and interesting ways. You can't keep running on fumes, child. Something has to change." Lillian knew she was right, but accepting help meant accepting vulnerability, and she'd spent years building armor against exactly that. She was still undecided when Hartwick appeared 2 days later, his timing too convenient to be coincidental. "Miss Ashcroft." He strode into her study without invitation, his expression harder than she'd seen before. "We need to talk." "I'm busy. This won't wait." He planted both hands on her desk, leaning in with calculated intimidation. "I've heard rumors about you and the Duke of Thornfield. Please tell me they're not true." "I don't see how that's your concern." "It's my concern when you're jeopardizing opportunities that could benefit both of us. I've been cultivating this relationship carefully." "What relationship? We've spoken twice." "I've been laying groundwork," Hartwick said impatiently. "Introducing you to the right people, positioning you for advantageous connections. And then you attack Lady Caroline at her own dinner party and start accepting private proposals from Thornfield? How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know. The question is, what are you thinking? Thornfield doesn't invest in failing estates out of kindness. He wants something." "Maybe he wants to help." Hartwick laughed, and it wasn't kind. "Men like him don't help women like you. They collect and discard. He's bored, you're novel, and when he loses interest, you'll be left with nothing but broken promises and a worse reputation than you started with." "You don't know that." "I know men. I know how this world works, and I know you're making a catastrophic mistake." He straightened. "I'm offering you a real alternative. Marry me. Combine our estates properly. I'll manage the business end, you can continue your little administrative projects, and we'll both benefit from the arrangement." Lillian stared at him. "You're proposing marriage." "I'm proposing a practical solution to your financial problems and my consolidation needs. Romance is irrelevant. Stability is what matters." "How romantic." "Romance is for people who can afford it. We're discussing survival." He wasn't wrong about that. Marriage to Hartwick would solve her immediate problems. He had capital, connections, and experience. It would be practical, logical, safe. It would also be surrender. "I need time to consider." "There's no time. The Hartwell auction is in 2 weeks. If you want any chance of securing that land, you need capital now. Thornfield's playing games. I'm offering real partnership." "Partnership implies equality. What you're describing is acquisition." Hartwick's expression hardened. "Don't be naive. You're in no position to negotiate equality with anyone. Take my offer or drown slowly. Those are your options." After he left, Lillian sat in the gathering dark, feeling trapped from all sides. Hartwick wanted her land. Sebastian wanted what? Purpose? Entertainment? Something real that would probably turn false once reality became inconvenient? She was still sitting there when Mrs. Brennan appeared with another letter. Sebastian's handwriting. "I've been thinking about trust," it read. "You said you don't trust me, and you're right not to. Trust is earned, not given. So here's my proposal. Come to Thornfield Estate. See how I manage it. Ask my tenants, my steward, my staff, whether I'm someone worth trusting. If you decide I'm not, walk away. No obligation, no pressure, no consequences. But if you decide there's a chance, even a small one, that this could work, then we move forward. Your choice. Always your choice." Lillian read it 3 times, looking for the trap. She couldn't find one, which either meant there wasn't a trap or it was better hidden than she could detect. "Well?" Mrs. Brennan asked. "I'm going to Thornfield." "Is that wise?" "Probably not. But neither is marrying Hartwick, and those seem to be my options. Take a risk on Sebastian, or take a certainty on someone who sees me as livestock." There's a third option, which is keep fighting alone. Lillian looked at the ledgers, the maps, the evidence of her slow failure. I've been fighting alone. It's not working. She sent her acceptance that evening and received a response within hours. Sebastian would send his carriage in 2 days. Thornfield Estate was a 3-hour journey. She could stay as long as she needed. The visit was either going to save her or ruin her. Lillian couldn't decide which terrified her more. Thornfield Estate was everything Ashcroft Hall should have been. Pristine grounds, well-maintained buildings, fields showing careful management and sustainable practice. Lillian stepped from the carriage feeling like a pauper visiting a kingdom, her inadequacy written in every detail she couldn't afford to replicate. Sebastian met her at the entrance, less formal than she'd seen him. "Welcome to my gilded cage. It's beautiful. It's efficient. There's a difference." He offered his arm. "Come meet the people who actually make this place work. They'll tell you things I can't." He was true to his word. Over the next hours, Lillian spoke with his steward, his tenants, his household staff. She asked direct questions about his management style, his reliability, his character. And slowly, a picture emerged that didn't match her expectations. "He's fair," the steward said. "Listens to advice. Doesn't make changes without understanding consequences. Best landlord I've worked for, and I've worked for 7. Lowered our rents during the bad harvest 3 years back," a tenant added. "Didn't have to. Could have squeezed us. Chose not to." "He's lonely," the housekeeper said quietly. "All this wealth, all this space, and he rattles around like a ghost. Needs something real to hold on to." By evening, Lillian's certainty had cracked. Either Sebastian was running an elaborate deception involving dozens of people, or he was actually what he claimed, someone trapped by circumstance, looking for purpose, genuinely wanting to help. They dined alone, the vast dining room feeling absurd for 2 people. "Well?" Sebastian asked. "Have I passed inspection?" "Your people speak highly of you. They're paid to. Not that highly. Real loyalty can't be bought." "Then you believe I'm sincere." Lillian set down her fork. "I believe you believe you're sincere. Well, whether that survives actual difficulty is another question. How do I prove it?" "You can't. Not with words, only with time and action." Sebastian nodded slowly. "Then let's start with action. The Hartwell auction is in 10 days. I'll provide capital to secure the land. You maintain full control of Ashcroft Hall. I'm a silent partner, not a manager. We establish clear legal boundaries protecting your ownership, and we see if this partnership works." "Why would you accept such limited terms?" "Because it's what you need to feel safe, and your safety matters more than my control." "That's irrational." "Probably. I'm discovering I'm an irrational person when it comes to you." There it was again, that dangerous honesty that made Lillian's defenses feel like paper. "I need to think," she said. "Of course." She walked the grounds that night, trying to sort through tangled emotions and practical calculations. Accept Sebastian's help, and she had a chance, real possibility of saving Ashcroft Hall. Refuse it, and she faced Hartwick's mercenary proposal or slow collapse. But beneath the practical calculation ran something more dangerous, the growing awareness that Sebastian affected her in ways she couldn't afford. He made her want things beyond survival, made her imagine futures that included more than duty, made her hope, and hope was the most dangerous thing of all. She found him in the library, working through estate documents by lamplight. "I'll accept your partnership," Lillian said, "on 3 conditions." Sebastian looked up. "Name them. First, everything is documented legally. I maintain ownership. You're an investor with defined returns, not a co-owner with creeping authority." "Agreed." "Second, if this fails, if the investment can't be recovered, I'm personally liable. I won't let you absorb my losses." "That's insane." "That's non-negotiable. I won't be in debt to you beyond what I can eventually repay." Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Agreed." "And the third? If you lose interest, if this becomes inconvenient or boring or more difficult than anticipated, you tell me directly. No games, no slow withdrawal, no pretending everything's fine while you plan your exit. I'd rather know the truth than live with comfortable lies." "You really don't trust me at all." "I can't afford to." He stood, moving closer. I'm going to prove you wrong. Not with words. I know you don't believe those. With action, with time, with showing up every single day until you realize I meant everything I said. And if I never realize it, then I'll keep showing up anyway. Lillian felt something crack in her chest, the first hairline fracture in armor she'd thought impenetrable. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and took her hand. I know you think this is novelty, boredom, a rich man's project, but you're wrong. You're the first person in my entire life who's treated me like I could be better than decorative, who challenged me to actually matter. That's not novelty. That's necessity. His hand was warm in hers, solid and real. Lillian knew she should pull away. Knew this moment was dangerous, that letting herself feel anything beyond practical partnership was inviting disaster. She didn't pull away. We should formalize the agreement, she said instead. Get the lawyers involved. Make this real. Tomorrow, tonight, just stay. Talk to me. Tell me about Ashcroft Hall, your father, what you want to build if we succeed. So she did. They talked until the lamps burned low, about land and legacy, fear and hope, the weight of promises that outlived the people who made them. And for the first time in years, Lillian felt like someone actually understood, not just the words, but the meaning beneath them. When she finally retired, exhausted and confused and strangely hopeful, she paused at the door. Sebastian? Yes? Thank you for seeing me, the real version, not the acceptable one. Same to you, he said quietly. Same to you. The week before the auction passed in a blur of legal documents and careful planning. Sebastian's lawyers drafted partnership agreements that protected Lillian's ownership while establishing his investment stake. It was fair, balanced, exactly what he'd promised, which somehow made her more nervous. You're waiting for the trap, Mrs. Brennan observed, watching Lillian review contracts for the fourth time. There's always a trap. Maybe not this time. That's what people think right before the trap springs. But no trap materialized. Sebastian kept his distance, was professional and respectful, didn't push for more than she'd agreed to. He was proving himself exactly as he'd promised, with action, not words. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Lillian wonder what she'd do if he really was exactly who he claimed to be. If this careful, damaged aristocrat genuinely saw her as more than a project. If the connection building between them was real and mutual and dangerous in all the ways she'd been trying to avoid. The night before the auction, Hartwick appeared at Ashcroft Hall unannounced. Last chance, he said without preamble. Marry me. Tomorrow. Before you make an irreversible mistake with Thornfield. I've made my decision. You've made an emotional decision. I'm offering a practical one. You're offering ownership of my estate in exchange for my name. That's not marriage. That's acquisition. And what's Thornfield offering? Love? Hartwick's laugh was bitter. He'll tire of you within a year. Men like him always do. You'll be left with broken promises and a heart you can't afford to have broken. That's my risk to take. No. Hartwick stepped closer, something desperate in his eyes. It's not just your risk. I need this land, Lillian. I'm in debt, serious debt. Consolidating our estates is the only way I can survive. You're killing me by refusing. For the first time, Lillian saw past the polished surface to the fear underneath. Hartwick wasn't just greedy. He was drowning. I'm sorry, she said and meant it. But I can't save you by sacrificing myself. Then I'll bid against you tomorrow. Drive the price higher than even Thornfield can justify. If I can't have the land through marriage, I'll make damn sure you can't have it at all. He left before she could respond, and Lillian stood in the empty study, dread pooling in her stomach. Tomorrow wasn't just an auction anymore. It was a war. And she'd just discovered the enemy was willing to burn everything down rather than lose. Lillian didn't sleep. She sat in her father's study watching dawn creep across the grounds, Hartwick's threat playing on repeat in her mind. He'd bid against her, drive the price beyond reason, destroy her chances out of spite and desperation. She should tell Sebastian, warn him that this wasn't just an auction anymore. It was a vendetta. But admitting Hartwick's threat felt like admitting weakness, like proving she couldn't handle her own problems without running to the wealthy Duke for protection. The carriage arrived at 9. Sebastian stepped out looking calm and collected. like he attended high-stakes property auctions every week. Maybe he did. Maybe this was just another Tuesday for someone with unlimited resources. "Ready?" he asked. "No," he smiled. "Good. Means you understand what's at stake." They rode in silence, tension thick enough to choke on. Lillian watched the countryside roll past, calculating and recalculating numbers that wouldn't improve no matter how many times she ran them. With Sebastian's backing, she could bid to £15,000, maybe 18 if they stretched. Beyond that, the investment stopped making financial sense. Hartwick would know that. He'd push past 18 just to watch her lose. The auction house was packed. Apparently 300 acres of prime land attracted attention. Lillian recognized most of the faces. Local landowners, investors, opportunists looking for profit. And there, near the front, Hartwick. He caught her eye and smiled like a predator. "He's here," she murmured to Sebastian. "I see him. He's going to bid against us, drive the price up. Let him. You don't understand. He doesn't care about winning. He just wants me to lose." Sebastian turned to face her fully. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen. We can't outbid spite. It's not rational." "Neither am I. Not anymore." Something hard entered his expression. "Trust me, please." The auction began with smaller parcels, plots of farmland, woodland, a few outbuildings. Lillian barely registered them, too focused on the main event. When the auctioneer finally announced the Hartwell property, the room shifted forward. 300 acres of prime agricultural land bordering multiple established estates. Excellent drainage, river access, proven crop yields. "We'll start bidding at £8,000. Hands went up immediately. 10,000, 11, 12. The price climbed steadily as serious buyers declared themselves. Lillian waited, watching Hartwick. He hadn't moved yet. At 14,000, half the bidders dropped out. At 16, only 4 remained. Lillian raised her paddle. 16,500, the auctioneer called. "Do I hear 17? Another bidder nodded. 17,000. Lillian bid again. 17,500. Then Hartwick entered the game. 20,000, he said clearly, his voice carrying across the room. Murmurs erupted. 20,000 was aggressive, higher than the land's assessed value. The other bidders hesitated, recalculating. Lillian's stomach dropped. He was doing it, actually doing it. 20,000 pounds, the auctioneer repeated. "Do I hear 21? Sebastian raised his paddle. 22,000. More murmurs. This was getting interesting. Hartwick didn't hesitate. 25. 28, Sebastian countered immediately. The room went silent. This wasn't normal bidding anymore. This was something else, a contest of wills played out in thousands of pounds. 30,000, Hartwick said, his eyes locked on Lillian. "And I'll keep going, all day if necessary." Sebastian leaned close to Lillian. "How badly do you need this land?" "It's the difference between survival and slow death." "Then we're not stopping." "Sebastian, 30,000 is insane. The land's not worth—" "I'm not bidding on land. I'm bidding on your future." He raised the paddle. 35,000. Hartwick's jaw tightened. He'd expected Sebastian to back down, to be rational. Instead, the Duke was matching his recklessness with resources Hartwick couldn't match. 40,000, Hartwick said, but his voice had lost confidence. 50, Sebastian replied without hesitation. The room exploded in whispers. 50,000 pounds for 300 acres was madness. Even accounting for location and quality, it was double the reasonable price. Hartwick stared at Sebastian, calculation visible on his face. He was in debt. Serious debt, he'd said. Could he actually afford to keep bidding? Or was this a bluff? 55, Hartwick said finally. 60, Sebastian answered. You're insane, Hartwick snapped. That land's not worth half that amount. Then why are you still bidding? Hartwick's face flushed red. Around them, people watched with the avid interest of spectators at a blood sport. This wasn't business anymore. This was personal, and everyone knew it. 60,000 pounds, the auctioneer said nervously. Do I hear 65? Hartwick opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands clenched on his paddle. He was done, out of resources or nerve or both. 60,000 going once, the auctioneer called. Going twice. Wait, Hartwick stood abruptly. I need to speak with Miss Ashcroft, privately. The auction is in progress. 5 minutes, please. The auctioneer looked uncertain, but nodded. 5-minute recess. Hartwick grabbed Lillian's arm, pulling her toward a side room. Sebastian moved to follow, but Lillian shook her head. Whatever this was, she needed to face it alone. In the small antechamber, Hartwick rounded on her. Call him off. What? Tell Thornfield to stop bidding. Let me have the land, please. Why would I do that? Because I'm begging you. The desperation in his voice was raw, ugly. I'm destroyed, Lillian. Completely destroyed. I owe money to people who don't accept excuses. If I don't consolidate these properties, if I can't show revenue improvement, they'll take everything. My estate, my name, everything my family built. That's not my problem. It could be your salvation. Marry me. Right now. Today. We combine estates, I get the revenue stream I need, you get stability and protection. We both survive. Lillian pulled her arm free. I already have a partner. You have a rich man's hobby project. How long before Thornfield gets bored? Before he realizes you're more trouble than entertainment? 6 months? A year? Hartwick's voice cracked. I'm offering real partnership, permanent, legal. You'll never have to worry about him walking away because you'll have actual security. Security built on your desperation and my surrender. That's not partnership. That's a cage. And what's Thornfield offering? Love? Hartwick laughed bitterly. Men like him don't love women like us. We're projects, distractions. He'll use you up and discard you the moment something more interesting appears. You don't know that. I know men. I know this world. And I know you're making a catastrophic mistake. He grabbed her shoulders. Please, Lillian. I'm not a good man. I know that. But I'm honest about what I am. I won't pretend to love you or fill your head with romantic nonsense. But I will be there. I won't leave. I can't afford to. The honesty was almost worse than the lies would have been. At least lies could be dismissed. This raw desperation demanded acknowledgement. I'm sorry, Lillian said quietly. Truly, but I can't save you by destroying myself. Hartwick's hands dropped. Something died in his expression. Hope, maybe, or the last shred of pride. Then I hope he's worth it. When he breaks your heart, remember I offered you something real. He walked out, leaving Lillian alone with the echo of his words and the sick certainty that at least part of what he'd said was true. Sebastian's interest might be genuine now, but novelty faded. Boredom returned, and she'd be left with a broken heart and the knowledge that she'd been warned. But the alternative was Hartwick, safety built on mutual desperation, a marriage without even the pretense of affection. That wasn't survival, that was slow death in a different form. She returned to the auction room. Sebastian stood immediately, concern clear on his face. What did he want? To convince me I'm making a mistake with you. Are you? Lillian looked at him, this wealthy, powerful man who'd somehow become tangled in her failing estate and complicated life. I don't know yet. Fair enough. He took her hand, not caring who saw. Let's finish this. The auctioneer resumed. 60,000 pounds. Do I hear further bids? Hartwick remained seated, staring at nothing. He was done. 60,000 going once, going twice. The gavel came down. Sold to the Duke of Thornfield for 60,000 pounds. Applause erupted. Sebastian squeezed Lillian's hand, but she couldn't feel triumph. They'd won, yes, but at a cost that made her queasy. 60,000 pounds for land worth maybe 30. It was fiscally insane. You overpaid, she said as they left the auction house. I invested in your future. Different calculation. That's not how business works. Good thing this isn't just business. Outside, London's afternoon chaos swirled around them. Carriages, pedestrians, vendors calling their wares. Normal life continuing while Lillian's world shifted beneath her feet. I need air, she said. Can we walk? They wandered into a nearby park, the noise fading to background hum. Lillian's mind churned with implications. She had the land, had the partnership, had saved Ashcroft Hall from immediate collapse. So why did she feel like she'd just stepped off a cliff? You're quiet, Sebastian observed. I'm processing. Regretting? I don't know. Ask me in a year when I see if you're still here or if Hartwick was right about novelty and boredom. Sebastian stopped walking. Is that what you think? That this is entertainment? I think you're a wealthy man unaccustomed to sustain difficulty. And saving my estate is going to be difficult, persistently, unglamorously difficult. When that reality settles in, I'll be there anyway. You can't know that. No, I can't. But neither can you. You're so convinced I'll leave that you won't even consider I might stay. His frustration showed through the usual control. What do I have to do to prove I'm serious? Bleed on your account books? Swear oaths I can't verify? Tell me what evidence you need. Time, action, consistency. Lillian met his eyes. Words are cheap, Sebastian. Showing up day after day when it's hard and tedious and unrewarding, that's proof. Then I'll show up. Every day. Until you believe me. And if that takes years, then it takes years. They stood in the middle of the park, tension crackling between them. People passed on either side, oblivious to the small drama playing out. I'm terrified, Lillian admitted finally, of this partnership, of you, of wanting something beyond survival and having it destroyed. I know. And you're still here. I'm still here. Something shifted in Lillian's chest. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. The faint hope that maybe, impossibly, Sebastian meant what he said. Before she could examine that hope too closely, someone called Sebastian's name. They turned to see Lord Pemberton approaching, his expression troubled. Sebastian, thank goodness. I need to speak with you urgently. Can it wait? No. Marcus glanced at Lillian apologetically. I'm sorry, Miss Ashcroft, but this is rather sensitive. Sebastian's expression hardened. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of her. It's about her. Or rather, about you and her. Marcus lowered his voice. The gossip from last week's dinner has evolved. People are saying you've developed an inappropriate attachment to Miss Ashcroft, that you overpaid drastically at today's auction on her behalf, that you're, forgive me, making a fool of yourself over an unsuitable woman. Let them talk. It's not just talk anymore. Lady Caroline is spreading rumors that Miss Ashcroft manipulated you into the investment, that she's using your interest to extract money for her failing estate. The word fortune hunter is being used rather liberally. Lillian felt ice flood her veins. Fortune hunter, the accusation that destroyed reputations and poisoned opportunities. Once that label attached, it didn't matter what the truth was. That's ridiculous, Sebastian said. I pursued her. I offered the partnership. I know, but that's not the story being told. And the more publicly you defend her, the more it looks like she's manipulated you into defending her. Marcus looked genuinely sympathetic. I'm sorry, but you need to know. Your mother has heard the rumors. She's returning to London. She wants to meet Miss Ashcroft. Sebastian went very still. When? Tomorrow. She's invited you both to dinner at Ravenhart House. Lillian's stomach dropped. Meeting Sebastian's mother, the Dowager Duchess of Thornfield, wasn't a social courtesy. It was an evaluation, a judgment, and based on the rumors Marcus described, she'd already been found wanting. Tell my mother I'll attend, Sebastian said. Miss Ashcroft can decide for herself. After Marcus left, they stood in heavy silence. You don't have to go, Sebastian said finally. My mother can be difficult. Will she make the rumors worse if I refuse? Probably. Then I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Lillian laughed without humor. Not for people like me. Your mother is a duchess. If I refuse her invitation, I'm arrogant. If I attend and fail to meet her standards, I'm unsuitable. Either way, I lose. Not if I stand with you. That makes it worse. Then you're choosing me over her and the rumors about manipulation become confirmed truth. Sebastian's jaw clenched. I don't care about rumors. You should, because they're not hurting you. They're hurting me. You're a duke making questionable choices. I'm a fortune hunter destroying your judgment. See the difference? Then what do you want to do? Go to the dinner. Face your mother. Try to survive the evaluation without making everything worse. Lillian met his eyes. And if she destroys me, you let her. You don't defend me. Don't make it worse by fighting. You let me fail cleanly so at least you can escape the wreckage. Absolutely not. Sebastian, no. I'm not throwing you to my mother like a sacrifice. If she attacks you, I'll defend you. If she disapproves, I'll face that consequence. We're partners now, remember? That means standing together. Even if standing together destroys us both? Especially then. Lillian wanted to argue, but exhaustion was setting in. She'd won the auction, secured the land, and somehow made her situation more precarious in the process. Adding a battle with Sebastian's mother felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. I need to go home, she said. Process this. Prepare for whatever tomorrow brings. I'll send the carriage at 6. Make it 7. Gives me an extra hour to contemplate my impending doom. His mouth quirked despite the tension. You're catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. Your mother's going to hate me. She hates everyone. It's not personal. It will be when she discovers I'm the unsuitable woman endangering her son's reputation and financial judgment. The carriage ride back to Ashcroft Hall passed in anxious silence. Lillian's mind spun through possible scenarios, each worse than the last. She'd faced hostile landowners, predatory creditors, and Hartwick's manipulations. But facing a duchess who believed Lillian was corrupting her son? That was a different category of threat. Mrs. Brennan took one look at her face and poured tea without asking. That bad? We won the auction, secured the land. Then why do you look like you're attending a funeral? Sebastian's mother wants to meet me. Tomorrow. Dinner at Ravenhart House. Mrs. Brennan went pale. Oh, child. Exactly. What are you going to wear? Does it matter? She's going to judge me unsuitable regardless of dress. Then you might as well look magnificent while being judged. Mrs. Brennan stood decisively. Come. We're altering your mother's evening gown, the blue silk. It's outdated, but we can work with it. They spent the evening doing exactly that, taking apart seams, adjusting bodices, creating something that wouldn't embarrass Lillian in the Dowager Duchess's dining room. It was practical work, requiring focus, which helped calm the panic churning in Lillian's stomach. You know, Mrs. Brennan said around a mouthful of pins, your mother faced situations like this. When she married your father, his family didn't approve, thought she was too common, too practical, but she won them over. How? By being exactly who she was. No apologies, no pretending. She was kind, competent, and refused to shrink. Mrs. Brennan met Lillian's eyes. You're her daughter. You can do the same. What if being myself isn't enough? Then the Duchess isn't worth impressing. Lillian wished she believed that. But Sebastian's mother wasn't just another society matron to be dismissed. She had power, influence, and the ability to destroy Lillian's reputation with a few well-placed words. The next day crawled past. Lillian tried to work on estate accounts but couldn't focus. Every time she looked at the ledgers, she saw tomorrow's disaster. Sebastian withdrawing his support, the partnership dissolving, Ashcroft Hall collapsing after all. At 6:30 she dressed in the altered gown. Mrs. Brennan had worked miracles. The outdated silk now looked almost fashionable, the adjustments hiding its age. Lillian stared at her reflection and saw a stranger, someone trying to pass as society, someone about to be exposed as an imposter. Sebastian's carriage arrived at 7 exactly. He helped her in, taking in her appearance with an expression she couldn't read. You look terrified, he said finally. I am terrified. My mother is formidable, but she's not a monster. What's the difference? Monsters act without reason. My mother always has reasons. Usually terrible ones, but reasons nonetheless. The attempt at humor fell flat. Lillian stared out the window as London appeared, gas lamps flickering to life as dusk settled. Ravenhart House loomed in Mayfair, 4 stories of elegant stone proclaiming wealth and power. Inside was worse. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than Ashcroft Hall's annual revenue. A butler led them to a drawing room where a woman sat like a queen holding court. The Dowager Duchess of Thornfield was perhaps 60, elegant in the way only generations of breeding and money could create. She wore black silk, still in mourning for her husband, who died 5 years ago, and pearls that probably predated England itself. Her eyes were sharp as glass. Sebastian, she said, not standing. You're late. We're exactly on time, Mother. Which for a duke is late. You should arrive unfashionably early to demonstrate you're not beholden to others' schedules. Her gaze shifted to Lillian. And this is the young woman causing such talk. Not Miss Ashcroft, not even your guest, just the young woman causing talk. Lillian curtsied, keeping her expression neutral. Your Grace, thank you for the invitation. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. The Duchess gestured to a chair. Sit. Let me look at you properly. Lillian sat, feeling like a specimen under examination. You're plainer than I expected, the Duchess said. Given the rumors, I assumed at least exceptional beauty to explain my son's infatuation. But you're quite ordinary. Mother, Sebastian began. I'm being honest. Surely Miss Ashcroft appreciates honesty, given her reputation for it. The Duchess's smile was sharp. You do value honesty, don't you, Miss Ashcroft? Yes, Your Grace. Excellent. Then let's be honest. You're managing a failing estate with no resources, no connections, and no prospects. My son, out of what I can only assume is misguided charity, or boredom, has involved himself in your financial affairs. This involvement has generated gossip suggesting you've manipulated him into supporting you. What's your response? Lillian took a careful breath. My response is that your son offered partnership of his own volition. I neither manipulated nor encouraged his initial interest. In fact, I actively discouraged it. Yet here you are, accepting his money, his influence, his public support. Accepting his partnership in a legitimate business venture with clearly defined legal boundaries protecting both parties. How convenient that this legitimate venture requires £60,000 of his money invested in your land. The land borders my estate and provides revenue streams that benefit both of us. The investment has sound financial reasoning. Does it? Or is the reasoning that my son is infatuated with you and you're exploiting that infatuation? Mother, that's enough, Sebastian said sharply. It's not nearly enough. I'm trying to determine if this young woman is a fortune hunter or merely naive. The Duchess turned back to Lillian. Which are you, Miss Ashcroft? Calculating or foolish? Something snapped in Lillian's carefully maintained composure. She'd endured insults from Lady Caroline, threats from Hartwick, condescension from society. But this, sitting in a mansion that cost more than her estate while being accused of manipulation by a woman who'd never worked a day in her life, was too much. Neither, Lillian said clearly. I'm desperate. My father left me an estate I'm not equipped to save alone. Your son offered help when no one else would. I accepted because the alternative was watching everything my family built crumble to dust. If that makes me a fortune hunter in your eyes, so be it. But I'm honest about my circumstances and my choices. Can you say the same? The room went silent. Sebastian's expression was caught between horror and admiration. The Duchess's eyes narrowed. You dare speak to me that way in my own home? You asked for honesty. I'm providing it. I asked for deference, for understanding of your place. My place is managing an estate and partnering with your son in a legitimate business venture. If you expect me to grovel for that, you'll be disappointed. The Duchess stood, and Lillian braced for dismissal, for the scorching attack that would destroy any remaining credibility she had. Instead, the Duchess laughed. It wasn't kind laughter. It was surprised, almost intrigued. You have spine, I'll give you that. Is that a compliment or an insult? It's an observation. The Duchess moved closer, studying Lillian like a puzzle. Most women cower when I challenge them. You attack back. It's either admirably brave or catastrophically stupid. Time will tell which. Indeed it will. The Duchess glanced at Sebastian. She's not what I expected. Few people are what you expect, Mother. True. Most are worse. She's... The Duchess paused, considering. Different. Whether that's better remains to be seen. Dinner was announced, and they moved to a dining room that could have seated 30, but held only 3. The meal was exquisite and tense, conversation carefully navigating around dangerous topics. The Duchess asked pointed questions about Ashcroft Hall's operations, testing Lillian's knowledge and competence. Lillian answered honestly, refusing to exaggerate or minimize. By dessert, something had shifted. The Duchess wasn't warm. Lillian suspected warmth wasn't in her repertoire, but the overt hostility had faded to cool assessment. You're more capable than the rumors suggest, the Duchess said finally. The rumors are designed to discredit me, not describe me. Accurate assessment. Lady Caroline is a vindictive woman nursing wounded pride. You embarrassed her publicly. She's retaliating. I noticed. What are you going to do about it? Lillian blinked. Do about it? Rumors don't fade on their own. They metastasize. If you want to survive in society, and you do, whether you admit it or not, you need to address them. How? The Duchess smiled, and it was calculating. By giving society something else to talk about, something bigger than speculation about your motives. Mother, Sebastian said warningly, don't. Don't what? Offer practical advice? The Duchess turned to Lillian. My son is besotted with you. Anyone with eyes can see it. The question is whether you return those feelings or are simply tolerating his attention for financial benefit. Lillian's throat tightened. That's not... It's a yes or no question, Miss Ashcroft. Do you care for my son beyond his utility as an investor? The room held its breath. Sebastian had gone very still, waiting for her answer. I don't know, Lillian said finally. I care for him. Whether that's genuine affection or gratitude or desperation wearing affection's mask, I genuinely don't know. I've spent so long focused on survival that I'm not sure I can recognize other emotions anymore. The honesty was brutal and raw, and Lillian immediately regretted it. Admitting uncertainty in front of the Duchess was like showing weakness to a predator. But the Duchess nodded slowly. At least you're truthful. That's more than most would be. She looked at Sebastian. And you? Still convinced this is worth the scandal? Yes? Even knowing she's uncertain about her own feelings? Especially knowing that. She's honest when she could lie. That's worth more than false declarations. The Duchess was quiet for a long moment, something unreadable crossing her face. Then she stood, signaling the evening's end. I won't support this publicly, she said. Not yet, but I won't oppose it either. You have 6 months to prove this partnership is legitimate and her feelings are genuine. If, at the end of that time, I remain unconvinced, I will use every resource at my disposal to end this association. Am I clear? Crystal, Sebastian said tightly. Good. Miss Ashcroft, a word alone before you leave. Sebastian looked ready to argue, but Lillian shook her head. She followed the Duchess to a small study, bracing for the final attack. You're playing a dangerous game, the Duchess said without preamble. My son is powerful but naive in matters of the heart. If you hurt him, if this is manipulation masquerading as partnership, I will destroy you so thoroughly that no one will remember your name, let alone your estate. Understood. But the Duchess's expression softened fractionally. If you're genuine, if you're actually fighting to save something that matters while simultaneously trying to navigate feelings you don't fully understand, then you have my respect, if not my approval. Why tell me this? Because I was you once. A woman trying to survive in a world designed to consume her. I married into power, but I earned my place by being ruthless when necessary and honest when possible. She met Lillian's eyes. You remind me of myself. That's either the greatest compliment I can give or a warning you should heed. I haven't decided which. Back in the carriage, Lillian sagged against the seat, exhausted. That was, Sebastian started. Horrifying? I was going to say better than expected, but horrifying works too. Your mother threatened to destroy me. That's how she shows affection. Terrifying family dynamic. You have no idea. He took her hand carefully, like he wasn't sure if she'd pull away. What you said about not knowing your feelings was honest. Too honest, probably. It was brave. It was stupid. I just admitted uncertainty to your mother. She'll use that against me. Or she'll respect you for refusing to lie, even when lying would be easier. Sebastian's thumb traced circles on her palm. I meant what I said. I'd rather have your uncertain honesty than anyone else's confident lies. Lillian wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this, whatever this was, could survive scrutiny and scandal, and the Dowager Duchess's 6-month evaluation period. But wanting wasn't the same as believing, and believing was dangerous when everything she'd worked for balanced on the edge of a knife. The next morning, Lillian woke to find a letter slipped under her door. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Hartwick's. Her hand shook as she opened it. Miss Ashcroft, since you refused my offer, I've been forced to pursue alternative solutions to my financial difficulties. I've sold information to certain parties about your partnership with Thornfield, specifically details about the auction and the overpayment. I've also provided Lady Caroline with ammunition for her campaign against you. I'm sorry, I didn't want to do this. But you left me no choice. What's coming next will make yesterday's dinner look like a pleasant social call. Prepare yourself. H. Lillian read it twice, ice flooding her veins. Hartwick had weaponized their partnership, sold information, armed her enemies, and whatever was coming next was apparently worse than facing the Dowager Duchess. She was still holding the letter when Mrs. Brennan burst in, her face pale. "Miss Lillian, you need to see today's paper. Now!" The headline hit like a physical blow. Duke's Folly. Ravenhart squanders fortune on unsuitable woman's failing estate. Exclusive details of auction scandal. Below it, a detailed article laying out every private detail of the partnership, the amounts, the terms, Sebastian's irrational overpayment, and quotes attributed to sources close to the situation, suggesting Lillian had seduced and manipulated the Duke into financial recklessness. Her name, her estate, her reputation, all destroyed in black and white for everyone to read. Lillian sank into a chair, the paper trembling in her hands. This was it, the trap she'd been waiting for, the consequence of hoping. And it was worse than she'd ever imagined. The paper lay on the table between them like evidence at a trial. Mrs. Brennan hovered nearby, wringing her hands, while Lillian read the article for the third time, each pass making it worse. They'd printed everything, the auction amounts, the partnership terms, even Sebastian's private comments about investing in her future rather than just land. Someone had been there, listening, documenting, or Hartwick had provided such detailed information that the reporter hadn't needed to be. "What are you going to do?" Mrs. Brennan asked quietly. "I don't know." "You could deny it, issue a statement." "Saying what? That the Duke didn't overpay £60,000 for land worth 30? That we're not partners? That I didn't accept his help?" Lillian dropped the paper. "It's all true. That's the problem. They didn't need to lie. They just needed to frame truth as scandal." A knock at the door made them both jump. Mrs. Brennan answered it, returning moments later with Sebastian. He looked like he'd ridden hard. His coat was disheveled, hair windblown, expression tight with barely controlled fury. "You've seen it," he said. Not a question. "Half of England has probably seen it by now. I'm going to destroy whoever wrote this, and Hartwick, especially Hartwick." Sebastian paced the small study like a caged animal. He gave them everything, names, dates, amounts. This wasn't gossip, it was a calculated attack. It was desperation. I refused to save him, so he's ensuring I drown with him. "You're not drowning. I won't let you." Lillian laughed without humor. "You can't stop this. The story's out. My reputation is destroyed. Yours is damaged by association. The partnership we built is now evidence of my manipulation. There's no fixing this." "Then we don't fix it. We fight it." "How? Sue for libel?" "Everything they printed is technically true." "Deny the partnership?" "That makes us both liars. Double down? That confirms the manipulation narrative." She met his eyes. "We're trapped, Sebastian." Hartwick knew exactly what he was doing. Sebastian stopped pacing. "Then we do something unexpected." "Like what?" "We prove them wrong. Not with words. Words are useless now. With action. We make the partnership so successful, so legitimate, that the scandal becomes irrelevant. That takes time we don't have. My reputation is being destroyed right now, this morning, while we stand here talking. Then we accelerate. Start implementing changes today. Bring in the equipment, fix the drainage, show measurable improvement immediately. Make the investment so obviously sound that even the scandal sheets have to acknowledge the business logic." Lillian wanted to believe it could work, but she'd spent enough years fighting losing battles to recognize when momentum had turned against her. "It's not enough," she said quietly. "Even if we prove the investment is sound, they'll say I seduced you into making it. The narrative isn't about business anymore. It's about me corrupting your judgment." So we changed the narrative. "How?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he dropped to one knee. Lillian's heart stopped. "What are you doing?" "Marry me." "Are you insane?" "Probably. But think about it. Right now, you're the unsuitable woman manipulating me for money. But if we're engaged, if I publicly declare my intention to marry you, then the partnership becomes legitimate. Not manipulation, but two people building a future together. That's even more insane than the original plan. Why? We're already partners. We already care about each other, even if you're uncertain about how much. Making it official just changes the framing. Lillian pulled away, her mind racing. You want to marry me to fix a scandal? I want to marry you because I'm falling in love with you, and this seemed like an efficient way to solve multiple problems simultaneously. He stood, catching her hands. I know it's fast. I know you're uncertain. But Lillian, this isn't just strategy. It's what I want. What I've wanted since you called me useless at the Pemberton dinner and made me realize I'd been wasting my life. You can't propose marriage as a solution to gossip. I'm not. I'm proposing marriage because I want to spend my life working beside you, fighting with you, building something that matters. The gossip is just convenient timing. This is insane. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. Lillian pulled her hands free, needing distance to think. Sebastian, marriages of convenience don't work, especially not marriages born from scandal and desperation. This isn't convenience, it's necessity wrapped in something real. You don't know that it's real. You might be caught up in novelty and rebellion against your mother and the excitement of doing something meaningful for the first time. That's not love. That's reaction. Then tell me what love is, Sebastian challenged. Because from where I stand, caring about someone enough to fight for them, to defend them, to want to build a life with them, that seems pretty close to the definition. Lillian opened her mouth to argue and realized she had no counterargument, because he was right, in a way that terrified her. What they had wasn't conventional or comfortable or safe, but it was real. I need time, she said finally. We don't have time. The longer we wait, the more damage the rumors do. If we announce an engagement today, the narrative shifts immediately. To what? Manipulative woman successfully traps Duke into marriage? To Duke chooses partner and society can accept it or be irrelevant. There's a difference. Mrs. Brennan cleared her throat from the doorway. If I may, the boy has a point. Scandal about a partnership is salacious. Scandal about an engagement is just society being judgmental of a man's romantic choice. And society respects a duke's right to choose, even if they disapprove of the choice. See, Sebastian said, even Mrs. Brennan thinks it's a good idea. Mrs. Brennan thinks it's marginally less catastrophic than the alternatives, the housekeeper corrected. That's not the same as good. Lillian looked between them, feeling the walls closing in. Every option led to disaster. Marry Sebastian and risk everything on what might be novelty wearing love's mask. Refuse and watch her reputation burn. Run and lose Ashcroft Hall anyway. If I agree, she said slowly, we do this right. Legal protections, clear boundaries, an actual engagement period to determine if this is sustainable or suicide. Agreed. And if it falls apart, when it falls apart, you don't try to save me from the consequences. You let me fail cleanly. That's the one condition I won't accept. Sebastian, no. If this fails, we fail together. I'm not letting you take the blame alone for a decision we make jointly. That's non-negotiable. Something in Lillian's chest cracked at that. The absolute certainty in his voice, the refusal to let her be sacrificed even hypothetically. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish, she said. Can't I be both? Despite everything, she smiled. Apparently. Is that a yes? It's a terrified, uncertain, probably catastrophic yes. But yes. Sebastian pulled her into his arms so fast she didn't have time to brace. The kiss was neither practiced nor polite. It was desperate relief and genuine feeling and the taste of a decision that might save them or destroy them both. When they finally broke apart, Mrs. Brennan was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Stop that, Lillian said. This is a strategic alliance. With kissing, Sebastian added. A strategic alliance with limited kissing for morale purposes. I'm going to want to renegotiate those limits. Despite the fear still churning in her stomach, Lillian felt something close to hope. Maybe this was insane. Maybe they'd regret it, but at least they'd face the disaster together. We need to announce it immediately, Sebastian said, already shifting to logistics, before the scandal has time to calcify. A formal notice in the papers, personal letters to key families, and, unfortunately, we need to tell my mother before she reads about it elsewhere. Lillian's brief moment of hope evaporated. Your mother is going to murder us both. Probably, but she'll respect the boldness. Maybe. They took Sebastian's carriage to Ravenhart House, the journey passing too quickly. Lillian spent it rehearsing explanations that all sounded desperate and unconvincing. The Dowager Duchess was in her study when they arrived, reading correspondence. She looked up as they entered, taking in their linked hands and matching expressions of determination. "This should be interesting," she said dryly. "Please tell me you haven't done anything irreversibly stupid." "That depends on your definition of irreversible," Sebastian said. "Oh dear." "We're engaged," Lillian said, deciding directness was the only approach. "As of this morning, we are announcing it today." The Duchess set down her letter with precise care. "I see. And this sudden decision has nothing to do with the scandal currently decorating every gossip sheet in London?" "It has everything to do with it," Sebastian said. "We're changing the narrative. By confirming it? Brilliant strategy." The Duchess's sarcasm could have cut glass. "Let me guess, you think announcing an engagement will somehow legitimize the partnership and silence the rumors about manipulation?" "Yes. It won't. It will confirm every suspicion about Miss Ashcroft's motives and make you look like a besotted fool." "I am a besotted fool," Sebastian said calmly. "I'm just making it official." The Duchess turned to Lillian. "And you? Are you truly willing to marry my son, or is this desperation wearing wedding clothes?" Lillian met her eyes steadily. "I'm willing to try. I can't promise it will work. I can't promise my feelings won't turn out to be gratitude masquerading as affection. But I can promise I'll be honest about it, and I won't trap your son in a marriage built on lies." "How reassuring," the Duchess said acidly. "My son is marrying someone who might be lying to herself about her own emotions. Every mother's dream." "Better than someone lying to him about hers," Lillian shot back. Silence fell, tense and crackling. Then the Duchess smiled, a small, genuine expression that transformed her face. "You really don't back down, do you?" "Not when it matters." "Good. You'll need that spine for what's coming." The Duchess stood, moving to her writing desk. "If you're going to do this, we do it properly. I'll draft announcements to the key families. Sebastian, you'll visit your clubs and make the engagement known personally. Miss Ashcroft, you'll need to be seen publicly with Sebastian. Dinners, social events, everywhere the gossips gather. Show them you're not hiding." "You're helping us?" Sebastian sounded shocked. "I'm containing the damage. There's a difference." The Duchess began writing with swift efficiency. "I don't approve of this engagement. I think it's reckless and possibly disastrous. But you're my son, and I won't let society destroy you because you made an impulsive decision, even a catastrophically impulsive decision." "Thank you," Lillian said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. If this marriage happens and proves to be the manipulation I suspect, I will make your life so miserable you'll wish you'd married Hartwick instead." Noted. They spent the next hours in coordinated action. The Duchess drafted announcements with surgical precision, framing the engagement as a romantic alliance between equals rather than scandal-driven desperation. Sebastian sent messages to every influential family in his circle. Lillian wrote to her few remaining connections, trying to present confidence she didn't feel. By afternoon, the news was spreading. By evening, it was the only thing London society discussed. The reactions were mixed and loud. Some families congratulated them. Others sent pointed silences. Lady Caroline issued a statement suggesting the engagement proved her initial assessment of Lillian's manipulative character. Hartwick sent nothing, but his silence felt more ominous than words. "We need to make an appearance," the Duchess said as evening approached. "The Ashford ball is tonight. Perfect opportunity to be seen together, engaged and unconcerned by gossip." "The Ashfords hate me," Lillian said. "Lady Caroline will use our presence to humiliate us." "Let her try. You'll be there as the Duke of Thornfield's fiancé, not an uninvited guest. The social dynamics have shifted." Lillian wanted to argue, but she knew the Duchess was right. Hiding would confirm guilt. Appearing would demonstrate confidence. So they went to the ball. The moment they entered, conversation stopped. Every eye in the room locked on them, or more specifically, on Lillian. She felt the weight of judgment, curiosity, and barely concealed hostility pressing from all sides. Sebastian kept her hand tucked in his arm, his posture radiating calm authority. "Breathe," he murmured. "You've faced worse." "Have I?" You faced my mother and survived. This is just theater. Lady Caroline descended on them immediately, her smile sharp as knives. Your Grace and Miss Ashcroft, or should I say, future Duchess. How unexpected. And so sudden. When you know, Sebastian said pleasantly. Indeed, though some might suggest such haste indicates questionable motives. Some might, Lillian said evenly, but some people see manipulation in every choice that doesn't serve their interests. Lady Caroline's eyes narrowed. I hope you're not implying... I'm not implying anything. I'm stating clearly that your campaign against me is transparent, vindictive, and ultimately irrelevant. Sebastian and I are engaged. You can accept that gracefully or continue embarrassing yourself with petty attacks. Either way, we're building a life together. The nearby conversations had stopped entirely now. Everyone was listening, waiting to see how Lady Caroline would respond to such direct confrontation. You're very bold for someone in your position, Lady Caroline said icily. My position is as the Duke of Thornfield's fiancée. What position are you in exactly? Sebastian made a noise that might have been a strangled laugh. Several onlookers weren't bothering to hide their amusement. Lady Caroline's face flushed. You'll regret this insolence. Probably, but not today. Lady Caroline swept away, radiating fury. The moment she was gone, several people approached. Some to congratulate, some to probe for gossip, all to assess this unexpected development. Lillian handled each interaction with careful politeness, neither apologizing for the engagement nor explaining it. She was learning to navigate this world, not by shrinking or adapting, but by refusing to play by rules designed to diminish her. Lord Pemberton pulled Sebastian aside at one point, his voice low but concerned. Are you certain about this? The timing is convenient. The timing is irrelevant. I want to marry her. Even knowing society believes she manipulated you into it? Society can believe whatever makes them feel superior. I know the truth. Marcus studied his friend. You're really in love with her. Apparently. Then I hope she deserves it, for both your sakes. Later, during a waltz, Sebastian pulled Lillian close enough to murmur, You're doing brilliantly. I'm terrified. Doesn't show. You look confident and utterly unbothered. I'm an excellent actress. No, you're just genuinely strong. There's a difference. The music swirled around them, and for a moment Lillian let herself imagine this could work, that the engagement could become real, that the partnership could evolve into something more, that she could have both Ashcroft Hall and this complicated, infuriating man who'd somehow become essential. Then she saw Hartwick. He stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching them with an expression that made Lillian's blood run cold. Not anger, not jealousy, calculation. He's here, she murmured to Sebastian. I see him. What's he planning? Nothing good. Hartwick approached as the waltz ended, his smile pleasant and poisonous. Congratulations on your engagement. How romantic, and how fortunate that it happened right when you needed to salvage your reputation. Thank you for your concern, Sebastian said flatly, though I don't recall requesting it. I'm simply observing the remarkable timing. A scandal erupts, conveniently followed by an engagement announcement, almost like it was planned. Almost like two people who care about each other decided to formalize their relationship, Lillian corrected. Is that what happened? Because I heard a different story. Something about desperate measures to contain damage I might have contributed to. Hartwick's expression sharpened. You destroyed my last chance at financial recovery. Did you really think I'd let that go unanswered? You sold information to the press, Sebastian said, his voice dangerously quiet. You weaponized a private business arrangement. I provided truth to interested parties. Not my fault the truth was inconvenient. You're destroying yourself as much as us. This vindictiveness is all I have left. Hartwick's mask slipped, revealing raw desperation underneath. You took my last option. My creditors are circling. I'm losing everything. So yes, I'm vindictive. I'm also finished, which means I have nothing to lose by making sure you're finished too. What does that mean? Lillian demanded. It means I have more information. Details about the partnership structure, the legal arrangements, the financial projections. Things that could be framed in even more damaging ways. He smiled. I've been holding back, giving you both a chance to reconsider. But since you've decided to double down with this absurd engagement, I'll be releasing everything, Tomorrow's papers will make today's scandal look gentle. We'll sue you for libel, Sebastian said. With what proof? I'm just a concerned citizen sharing information with the press. Nothing illegal about that. Immoral, perhaps. But we're past morality now. He walked away, leaving them standing in the middle of the ballroom, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. He's bluffing, Lillian said, but her voice shook. Maybe. Or maybe he really does have more ammunition. Sebastian took her hand. Either way, we face it together. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She paced her room at Ashcroft Hall, alternating between terror and fury. Hartwick had more information to release. The scandal would deepen. The engagement that was supposed to solve everything might just make it worse. At midnight, she heard hoofbeats. She looked out to see Sebastian's horse. He'd ridden rather than taking the carriage. Within minutes, he was at her door, windblown and determined. I couldn't stay away, he said, not knowing you were here worrying alone. You shouldn't be here. The scandal is already catastrophic. My being here can't make it worse. They sat in her father's study, the account books and maps surrounding them like old friends. Lillian poured brandy with shaking hands. What if he's not bluffing? She asked. Then we survive it anyway. How can you be so calm? Because I've already decided what matters. You matter. This, he gestured at the maps, matters. Everything else is just noise. Easy to say when your entire life isn't at stake. My entire life is at stake, Sebastian corrected. Just in different ways. You're fighting to save your state. I'm fighting to save myself from meaningless existence. We're both risking everything, Lillian. The difference is I've accepted that risk. You're still trying to calculate a safe path. Because I have to. I don't have the luxury of romantic gestures. This isn't romantic gesture, it's survival. You just don't recognize it yet because you've been alone so long you've forgotten what partnership looks like. The words hit harder than he probably intended. Lillian had been alone, desperately, exhaustingly alone, for so long that accepting help felt like weakness rather than strength. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. So am I. But we're scared together, which has to count for something. They talked until dawn, planning contingencies and worst-case scenarios. When the sun rose, they were still sitting there, surrounded by maps and ledgers and the fragile hope that somehow, impossibly, they might survive this. The next day's papers were exactly as bad as Hartwick had promised. More details about the partnership, more quotes from anonymous sources, more speculation about Lillian's motives. The engagement that was supposed to shift the narrative just became more evidence of her manipulation. But something unexpected happened. Letters started arriving at Ashcroft Hall. Not from society families, from Sebastian's tenants, from people who'd worked with him, dealt with him, benefited from his management. I've known His Grace for 15 years, one letter read. He's not a fool. If he's chosen this woman, she must be worth choosing. The scandal sheets don't know him like we do. Another, the Duke invested in our village when no one else would. Fixed roads, funded schools, listened to our problems. He doesn't make reckless choices. This partnership must be sound, gossip notwithstanding. They kept coming, testimonials from people who actually knew Sebastian, who'd seen his judgment in action, who respected him enough to defend choices they didn't fully understand. Your people are defending you, Lillian said, reading through the stack. They're defending us, Sebastian corrected, because they trust my judgment enough to extend that trust to you. Why would they do that? Because I've earned their trust over years. And trust, once established, is harder to destroy than reputation. Mrs. Brennan appeared with another delivery, this time a letter from the Dowager Duchess. I've been making calls, it read in her precise handwriting, reminding certain families of social debts owed and alliances maintained. Many are reconsidering their positions on your engagement, not out of approval, I'm not performing miracles, but out of pragmatic recognition that opposing a duke's choice is politically unwise. It's not much, but it's a start. Don't make me regret this. D. Lillian stared at the letter. Your mother is helping us. She's containing damage while maintaining plausible deniability about approval. Very on brand. I don't understand her. Neither do I. But I'll take help wherever it comes from. The tide was shifting, slowly, fractionally, but shifting nonetheless. The scandal still existed, Hartwick's attack still damaged. But cracks were appearing in the unified front of disapproval. Then Marcus Pemberton arrived with unexpected news. I've been investigating Hartwick, he said without preamble. The debts he mentioned? They're worse than he admitted. He's not just facing financial ruin, he's facing criminal charges for fraud. He's been inflating property values, misleading investors, running schemes that cross legal lines. Can we prove it? Sebastian asked. I can. I've documented everything, and if this information became public, Hartwick would be destroyed, completely and irrevocably. Lillian felt ice and fire war in her chest. You want us to destroy him the way he tried to destroy us. I want you to have leverage. What you do with it is your choice. She looked at Sebastian, seeing the same conflict in his eyes. Revenge would be easy, deserved even. Hartwick had weaponized their partnership, sold their private information, tried to burn them out of spite. But destroying him would make them exactly what the rumors claimed: manipulative, ruthless, willing to crush anyone who threatened them. No, Lillian said finally. What? Marcus looked stunned. We're not releasing it, not unless he forces our hand with another attack. He's already attacked, multiple times, and we survived. Barely, but we survived. If we destroy him now, it proves we're what everyone thinks, people who use power to eliminate threats. That's not who I want to be. She looked at Sebastian. Is it who you want to be? He was quiet for a long moment. No, but keeping this information secret is a risk. Everything is a risk. At least this way we maintain moral high ground. You're more forgiving than I am, Sebastian said. I'm not forgiving anything. I'm choosing which battles to fight. And this one, destroying a desperate man who's already destroying himself, isn't worth what it would cost us. Marcus shook his head. You're both more principled than is strictly wise. But I'll hold the information. If Hartwick attacks again, we use it. Agreed? Agreed. 3 days later, something remarkable happened. Lady Pemberton, Marcus's mother and one of society's most influential voices, invited Lillian and Sebastian to dinner. A small gathering, she said. Just close friends. It was an olive branch, public acknowledgement that the engagement might be legitimate rather than scandalous. This is significant, the Dowager Duchess said when she heard. Lady Pemberton doesn't extend invitations lightly. If she's accepting you, others will follow. The dinner was surprisingly pleasant. No attacks, no veiled insults, just genuine conversation about estates and management and the challenges of modernizing old systems. Several guests asked Lillian's opinion on agricultural matters, treating her expertise as valuable rather than aberrant. On the carriage ride home, Sebastian took her hand. You're winning them over. They're being polite to avoid offending you. Some, maybe. But you saw Lord Hammond. He was genuinely interested in your drainage solution. And Lady Pemberton asked about your tenants with actual curiosity, not condescension. It's one dinner doesn't undo the scandal. No, but it's a start. The narrative is shifting from manipulative woman to capable partner. Slowly, but shifting. Lillian wanted to believe it, and for the first time since the scandal broke, she almost did. The next morning brought a letter from an unexpected source, Hartwick. Miss Ashcroft, I've heard rumors about information Marcus Pemberton has gathered about my financial situation. I assume you've chosen not to release it, or I'd already be destroyed. Thank you for that mercy. I didn't deserve it. I'm leaving England. There's nothing left for me here except debt and consequences. Before I go, I wanted you to know I was wrong about you and Thornfield. What you have isn't manipulation. It's something I've never managed to build. Something real. I'm sorry for the damage I caused. For what it's worth, I hope you succeed. You deserve to. Hartwick. Lillian read it twice, emotion tangling in her chest. Relief that Hartwick was leaving. Sorrow for a man so desperate he'd destroyed himself trying to survive. And something like vindication, proof that even her enemy recognized what she and Sebastian had built. She showed the letter to Sebastian. He read it in silence, then set it aside. Feel vindicated? He asked. I feel tired and relieved and strangely sad for him. You have a kinder heart than I do. I just understand desperation. I've lived it for months. The difference is, I had you to help me fight it. He had no one. Sebastian pulled her close. You'll never have no one again. Whatever happens, you have me. And my insufferable mother. And apparently Marcus's investigative skills. We're building something, Lillian. Not just a partnership or an estate or an engagement. A life. Messy and complicated and probably full of more scandals, but real. Is that a promise? It's a certainty. 2 weeks later, the formal engagement announcement appeared in all the major papers. The Dowager Duchess had crafted it personally, framing their union as a romantic partnership between equals. Responses flooded in, some congratulatory, some skeptical, but fewer outright hostile than before. The scandal was fading. Not gone. Scandals never truly disappeared, but losing power. Lillian and Sebastian attended events together, worked on estate improvements together, built a public presence as a united front, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, society began to accept them. At a ball 3 weeks after the engagement announcement, Lady Caroline approached Lillian with something almost like respect. "You've won," she said simply. "I wasn't aware we were competing." "Of course we were. And you won. Not through manipulation or seduction, through sheer stubborn refusal to be destroyed. I can admit when I've been beaten." "Is this an apology?" "This is an acknowledgement. I was wrong about you. You're not a fortune hunter. You're just someone fighting to survive in a world designed to consume you. I can respect that even if I don't like you. I'll take it." After Lady Caroline left, Sebastian materialized at Lillian's elbow. "Did she just admit defeat?" "Something like that." "That's unprecedented. She never admits anything." "Maybe people are capable of growth. Even people we expect to be petty forever." "Philosophical today, aren't you?" "I'm realizing something. We're not just fighting scandal or saving estates. We're rewriting rules, showing that partnerships can be real, that women can manage land, that marriages can be built on respect instead of just transaction. That matters more than I thought." Sebastian took her hand right there in the middle of the ballroom where everyone could see. "Then let's keep rewriting. Together." And for the first time since the scandal broke, since Hartwick's betrayal, since the Dowager Duchess's threats, Lillian felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not desperate, fragile hope that would shatter at the first obstacle, but solid, earned hope, the kind built on partnership and tested by fire and proven strong enough to survive. They'd won the first battle, not through destruction or manipulation, but through stubborn persistence and refusal to be defined by scandal. And if they could win that battle, maybe they could win the war. Hope, Lillian was learning, was both blessing and burden. It made you believe things could improve, which meant you had something to lose again. She stood in the Ashcroft Hall study 3 months after the engagement, reviewing the transformation happening around her. The drainage project Sebastian had funded was halfway complete. New equipment sat in barns that had been empty for years. Tenant cottages were being repaired. The account books, for the first time in memory, showed possibility instead of just managed decline. Everything was working. The partnership was succeeding, which terrified her more than failure ever had. "You're doing it again," Sebastian said from the doorway. "Doing what?" "Waiting for disaster. I can see it in how you stand, like you're braced for impact. Can you blame me? Every time things improve, something goes wrong." "Nothing's going wrong. The estate is stabilizing. Society has mostly accepted us. Even my mother has stopped threatening your life weekly. That's progress." "It's too much progress. Too fast. Something has to break." Sebastian crossed the room, taking her hands. "Or maybe things are just actually working. Maybe we're allowed to succeed." "I don't know how to do that. Succeed, I mean. I've spent so long fighting that I don't know what comes after winning. We figure it out together, like everything else." Before Lillian could respond, Mrs. Brennan appeared with her usual impeccable timing. "Miss Lillian, you have a visitor, the Dowager Duchess." Lillian's stomach dropped. Sebastian's mother never visited Ashcroft Hall. Her presence here meant something significant, good or catastrophic, impossible to predict. The Duchess swept in like she owned the place, her critical gaze cataloging every detail. Lillian watched her notice the worn furniture, the patched curtains, the evidence of years spent choosing function over appearance. "Tea, Mrs. Brennan," the Duchess said, "and then privacy, please." Once they were alone, the Duchess settled into the least worn chair and studied Lillian with unnerving intensity. "I've been observing you," she said finally. "For 3 months, I've watched how you handle this partnership, this engagement, the social pressures. I've listened to reports from Sebastian, from tenants, from people who've dealt with you both." "And?" Lillian asked, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. "And I was wrong about you. The admission hit like a physical blow. The Dowager Duchess didn't admit error, ever. I thought you were manipulating my son, the Duchess continued. Using his infatuation to secure financial support, I was prepared to destroy you if my suspicions proved correct. What changed your mind? You did. You've had 3 months to exploit Sebastian's feelings, to extract more investment, to push for immediate marriage and legal access to his wealth. Instead, you've maintained every boundary you established, insisted on repaying the investment, and actively resisted attempts to accelerate the engagement. That's not how manipulation works. Lillian didn't know what to say. She'd expected criticism or testing, not this frank acknowledgement. I'm not saying I approve, the Duchess added. You're still unsuitable by traditional standards. No fortune, questionable connections, a directness that borders on insolence. But you're genuine, and you make my son happy in ways I haven't seen since before his father died. That matters more than suitability. Thank you, Lillian managed. Don't thank me yet. I'm here because the 6-month evaluation period I imposed is nearly complete. In 2 weeks, I'll either support your marriage publicly or oppose it. I wanted to give you advance notice of my decision. Which is? Conditional support. I'll endorse the engagement publicly and provide social backing. But the Duchess's expression hardened. The moment you prove me wrong, the moment I detect genuine manipulation or exploitation, I will use every resource at my disposal to end this union. Am I clear? Crystal. Good. Now show me what you've accomplished with Sebastian's investment. I want to see actual results, not pretty promises. They spent the next hours touring the estate. Lillian showed her the drainage improvements, the equipment upgrades, the tenant cottage repairs. She explained the revenue projections, the crop rotation plans, the 5-year sustainability strategy. She held nothing back, letting the work speak for itself. The Duchess asked sharp questions, probing for weaknesses or exaggeration. Lillian answered honestly, acknowledging challenges and uncertainties alongside successes. By afternoon's end, something had shifted in the Duchess's expression. Not quite approval, but something close to respect. You've done well, she said. Better than I expected. This partnership has substance. Thank you. I'm hosting a ball in 2 weeks. I'll announce my support for your engagement there, publicly and unambiguously. It will shift the remaining social opposition. Why help us now? Because Sebastian deserves happiness, and you seem capable of providing it. Because this estate matters to you in ways society marriages rarely accommodate. And because, the Duchess paused, something almost vulnerable crossing her face. Because I was you once. Fighting to prove myself worthy of a world designed to exclude me, I won't deny you the same chance. After the Duchess left, Lillian stood in the drive, stunned. Did she just give us her blessing? Sebastian asked, having watched from the window. Conditional blessing, with threats attached. That's my mother's version of wholehearted approval. It's terrifying and comforting simultaneously. Also very on-brand. Sebastian pulled her close. 2 weeks until the ball. Think you can survive another society gauntlet? Do I have a choice? Not really, but I'll be there so you won't face it alone. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Lillian worked with the Duchess's seamstress to create a gown that wouldn't embarrass anyone. Deep emerald silk that actually fit properly made her look less like she was playing dress-up and more like she belonged. Mrs. Brennan cried when she saw it. Stop that, Lillian said. It's just a dress. It's not just a dress. It's proof you've survived. You're going to that ball as the Duke of Thornfield's acknowledged fiancé with his mother's public support. Do you understand how impossible that seemed 6 months ago? Lillian did understand. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in debt and desperation. Now she had a stabilizing estate, a legitimate partnership, and an engagement to a man who'd somehow become essential to her existence. I'm still terrified, she admitted. Good. Means you haven't gotten complacent. The night of the ball arrived with the weight of finality. This wasn't just another social event. It was the Dowager Duchess's public declaration, the moment that would either cement their acceptance or expose fractures still waiting to destroy them. Sebastian's carriage collected her at 7. He looked devastating in formal black, his usual control tempered by something that might have been nervousness. Ready? He asked. No. You? Not even slightly. Let's go anyway. Ravenhart House blazed with enough candles to illuminate half of London. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging society's most influential families. Lillian recognized faces from previous disasters. Lady Caroline, the Ashfords, people who judged and dismissed her. Tonight, she walked in as Sebastian's acknowledged fiancée. The dynamics had shifted. They entered together, Sebastian's hand steady at her back. The receiving line processed slowly, courtesies exchanged, congratulations offered with varying degrees of sincerity. Then they were through, into the ballroom proper. The Dowager Duchess stood at the far end, positioned like a general commanding troops. When she saw them, she nodded once, acknowledgement and signal combined. "She's going to make the announcement now," Sebastian murmured. "How do you know?" "Because she's moving to the orchestra platform. She always makes important declarations from elevated positions. Says it's about sightlines. Really, it's about power." The Duchess raised her hand, and the room fell silent with the practiced obedience of people who knew better than to ignore her. "Thank you all for attending," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly. "I've gathered you here tonight for celebration and announcement. As many of you know, my son became engaged 3 months ago to Miss Lillian Ashcroft. This engagement has been the subject of considerable speculation and, frankly, uncharitable gossip." The room held its breath. "I'm here to end that speculation. I've observed Miss Ashcroft extensively. I've examined the partnership she's built with Sebastian. I've investigated the claims of manipulation and fortune hunting that have circulated so freely." The Duchess paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "And I've concluded that those claims are baseless, malicious, and beneath the dignity of anyone present." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Miss Ashcroft is a woman of capability, integrity, and remarkable strength. She has revitalized a failing estate through genuine effort and partnership with my son. Their engagement is built on mutual respect and affection, the foundations of any successful marriage. I give this union my full support and expect you all to do the same." The silence that followed was absolute. The Dowager Duchess had just used her considerable social power to legitimize an engagement half of London had dismissed as scandal. Opposing her now would be opposing her directly. Slowly, applause began. Hesitant at first, then building as people recognized the political wisdom of supporting the Duchess's choice. Within moments, the room was clapping. Not all genuine, but all present. Sebastian took Lillian's hand, raising it in acknowledgement. She felt exposed and vulnerable and strangely powerful all at once. "Thank you, Mother," Sebastian said, his voice carrying. "For your support and your honesty. Lillian and I are grateful." "Don't make me regret it," the Duchess replied, but her tone held warmth. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People who'd avoided them for months suddenly wanted conversations. Families who'd been coldly polite now offered genuine congratulations. The social landscape had shifted, and everyone was scrambling to adjust their positions accordingly. Marcus Pemberton found them near midnight, grinning. "Well, that was something. That was my mother wielding power like a weapon," Sebastian said. "But I'll take it. Half these people are only congratulating you because they're terrified of her. And the other half are doing it because they actually believe you've built something real, which you have." Marcus looked at Lillian. "You've won them over. Not all of them, not completely, but enough. That's more than most people in your position could have achieved." "I had help," Lillian said. "You had opposition too, and you survived it. That counts." Later, standing on the terrace while the party continued inside, Lillian let herself breathe fully for the first time in hours. "We did it," she said quietly. "We did," Sebastian agreed. "Society accepts us. My mother supports us. The estate is stabilizing. We've won. So why am I waiting for something to go wrong? Because you've spent years expecting disaster. Accepting victory takes practice." He turned her to face him. "Lillian, we've survived scandal, sabotage, my mother's evaluation, and your own certainty that I'd abandon you. What's left to fear? The future, what comes after we win. We build, we grow. We figure out if this engagement becomes a marriage or if we were wrong about what we feel. We give ourselves permission to be uncertain and work through it anyway. And if we fail, then we fail together, but I don't think we will." He took both her hands. "I love you. I'm fairly certain of that now. I love your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to perform for anyone. I love that you call me useless when I'm being useless and stand beside me when it matters. I love that you make me want to be better than the bored aristocrat I was becoming." Lillian's throat tightened. "I don't know if I love you yet. I want to, but I'm still afraid it's gratitude wearing love's mask." "Then we wait until you know. I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" "Promise." 6 months later, on a spring morning that felt like rebirth, Lillian stood in Ashcroft Hall's study reviewing accounts that finally balanced properly. The estate was profitable, tenants were secure, the land her father had fought for was thriving. She'd done it, saved something everyone said was unsavable. The door opened and Sebastian entered without knocking, a privilege earned through months of showing up exactly as he'd promised. He carried papers that made Lillian's stomach drop reflexively. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong, but we need to discuss the engagement." Here it was, the moment she'd been dreading. He'd grown bored or overwhelmed or realized the novelty had faded and he wanted out. "All right," she said carefully. "We've been engaged for 9 months, living in this uncertain state, testing whether partnership could become more. And I think it's time we made a decision." "What kind of decision?" Sebastian set down the papers. "Marriage contracts," she realized, drawn up by lawyers and waiting for signatures. "Marry me," he said, "not out of strategy or scandal management or partnership logistics. Marry me because you want to, because you've decided what we have is real and worth making permanent." Lillian looked at the contracts, her mind racing. 9 months ago, she would have said this was impossible. 3 months ago, she would have been uncertain. Now, "I love you," she said, and the truth of it was both terrifying and liberating. I don't know when it shifted from gratitude to something real, but it did. You're infuriating and privileged and sometimes catastrophically impractical. And you're also the best partner I could have asked for. You show up, you listen, you fight beside me instead of for me. That's worth more than I knew how to value. Is that a yes? That's a terrified, uncertain, probably still somewhat catastrophic yes. But yes. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kissing her with the kind of relief and joy that came from months of patient waiting finally rewarded. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "When?" he asked. "Soon, before I panic and change my mind." "Tomorrow? That's insane." "You keep saying that about my plans. They keep working anyway." They settled on 2 weeks, enough time to arrange something proper, but not so much that Lillian could spiral into doubt. The Dowager Duchess took over planning with the efficiency of a military campaign. Mrs. Brennan cried again. Marcus Pemberton made increasingly ridiculous best man speeches at the bachelor dinner, each more embarrassing than the last. The wedding was at Thornfield's chapel, small and private compared to the massive society affairs usually expected of dukes. Lillian wore cream silk that the Duchess had somehow procured in impossible time. Sebastian looked nervous for the first time since she'd met him. "Having doubts?" she whispered as they stood at the altar. "Terrified you'll realize you could do better, and run." "Too late. Already signed the contracts. Those aren't binding until the ceremony completes." "Then let's complete it before I panic." The ceremony was traditional and surprisingly moving. When the vicar asked if she took Sebastian as her husband, Lillian heard herself say yes with a certainty that surprised her. When he asked Sebastian the same, his response was immediate and unshakable. Then they were married, and the small gathering erupted in applause, and Lillian realized she'd just made the most terrifying and possibly best decision of her life. The reception was elegant chaos. The Dowager Duchess gave a speech that managed to be touching and threatening simultaneously. Marcus told stories about Sebastian's university days that made the groom visibly wince. Lillian's tenants, invited against all protocol, drank champagne and celebrated like family. Late in the evening, Sebastian pulled her aside to a quiet terrace. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Married. Strange? Good strange or bad strange?" "Too early to tell. Ask me in 10 years. "I will, and 10 years after that, and every decade until we're too old to remember the question." Lillian leaned against him, watching the celebration continue inside. A year ago, she'd been alone and desperate, convinced she'd lose everything. Now she had a thriving estate, a legitimate partnership, and a marriage that might actually work. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" for being stubborn enough to pursue me when I was trying to push you away, for showing up every day even when I was certain you'd leave, for proving that partnerships can be real. Thank you for letting me, for being brave enough to risk hope when you had every reason to protect yourself, for making me want to be better than decorative. They stood there as the sun set over Thornfield, two people who'd fought their way from scandal and desperation to something real and hard-won. It wasn't perfect. They still argued about estate management. Lillian still sometimes waited for disaster. Sebastian still occasionally made impulsive decisions that made her want to scream. The Dowager Duchess still issued veiled threats disguised as advice. But it was real. And real, Lillian was learning, was worth more than perfect. 5 years later, Lillian stood in the same Ashcroft Hall study, reviewing accounts that showed not just stability, but actual profit. The estate her father had died trying to save was thriving. Tenant families were secure. The land was productive and sustainable. She'd kept her promise. Sebastian appeared in the doorway, their 3-year-old daughter perched on his hip. Eleanor had her mother's directness and her father's stubborn streak, a combination that promised interesting teenage years.
Mama, Papa says we can ride to the North Fields, Eleanor announced. Can we? Did Papa mention we have guests arriving in 2 hours? Papa may have forgotten that detail, Sebastian admitted. Papa frequently forgets details. That's why Mama manages the schedule. That's why Mama is the terrifying organized one, and Papa is the fun parent. Papa is the parent who creates chaos, different thing. Eleanor giggled, clearly enjoying the familiar banter. They compromised. A short ride now, then back to prepare for the guests. The dinner was celebrating the opening of a new tenant education program, one of several initiatives they'd implemented together. As they rode across land that had nearly been lost, Lillian felt something close to contentment. Not the naive happiness of people who'd never fought for anything, but the deep satisfaction of having built something real through sustained effort and partnership. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked. "That we did it. Saved the estate, built the partnership, made the marriage work. Against considerable odds. We're insufferably competent. We're stubborn and occasionally lucky. That too." Eleanor kicked her pony into a trot, forcing them to follow. They rode together across fields that showed careful management and sustainable practice, past tenant cottages that were maintained and secure, through land that represented years of fighting and compromise and shared vision. Later that evening, after the dinner and guests and social performance, they sat in the study that had witnessed so many battles and victories. "Do you ever regret it?" Lillian asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Choosing this complicated life over something easier?" Sebastian looked at her like she'd suggested regretting breathing. "Not for a second. This life, you, Eleanor, the estate, the work that actually matters, this is the only thing I've done that feels real. Everything before you was just expensive boredom. We're not always this functional. Remember last month when we fought about the Southfield crop rotation for 3 days? That was invigorating. I was right, you were wrong, and eventually you admitted it. I admitted your approach had merit. That's not the same as admitting wrongness. See? This is why I love you. You're constitutionally incapable of just conceding defeat. And you're constitutionally incapable of not pushing every argument past its natural conclusion. Perfect match. And somehow, impossibly, it was. Not perfect in the traditional sense. They still disagreed, still challenged each other, still drove each other slightly insane. But they showed up. They worked together. They built something that mattered through sustained effort and genuine partnership. Years later, when Eleanor was old enough to understand, Lillian told her the full story. Not a sanitized fairy tale version, but the real one. Scandal and desperation, manipulation and doubt. The terrifying choice between hope and safety. "Why did you choose hope?" Eleanor asked. "Because Papa showed up. Every day, even when I was certain he'd leave, he showed up. That's how you know something's real. Not through grand gestures or pretty promises, but through consistent presence. And you lived happily ever after. We lived, sometimes happily, sometimes frustrated, always together. That's better than ever after. That's real." On the 20th anniversary of their engagement, Sebastian arranged a surprise. He took Lillian back to the auction house where they'd fought for the Hartwell property, where he'd bid £60,000
and changed both their lives. "Why here?" she asked. "Because this is where we won, not the battle. We were still fighting for months after this. But this is where I decided you were worth any price, where I stopped calculating risk and just committed." "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing you've ever done." "Definitely both. Would you have done anything differently?" Lillian thought about it honestly. The scandal, the fear, the months of uncertainty, the gradual building of trust, the slow transformation from desperate partnership to genuine love, the work that never ended, the challenges that kept coming, the life they'd built through sustained effort. "No," she said finally, "I wouldn't change anything. Even the terrible parts led here, and here is worth the journey." Insufferably sentimental. "You started it with this romantic gesture." Fair point. They stood in the empty auction house, two people who'd fought their way from scandal and desperation to something real and enduring. The journey hadn't been smooth, it hadn't been easy, but it had been theirs, built through genuine partnership and stubborn refusal to give up. And that, Lillian realized, was the real victory. Not wealth or social acceptance, or even the saved estate. The victory was finding someone who showed up consistently, who fought beside you instead of for you, who made you want to be brave even when fear made more sense. The victory was building something real in a world designed for performance. The victory was choosing hope, even when safety seemed smarter. And the victory was proving every single day through sustained effort and genuine partnership that the choice had been right. They left the auction house hand in hand, walking into the London evening that had witnessed so many of their battles. Behind them was scandal and desperation and the people they'd been before finding each other. Ahead was uncertainty and challenge and the continuing work of building a life together. But they'd face it together, as they'd faced everything, stubborn, imperfect, occasionally infuriating, and absolutely unwilling to give up on something that mattered. And that made all the difference.